in a universe where fate made a single mistake. There existed a demon who conquered death itself. His name was Muzan Kibutsuji, the first demon, the Demon King, a creature who had walked the earth for over 1,000 years without knowing defeat. He had transformed humanity into his army, spread his curse like a plague, and stood as the ultimate predator in a world where even the bravest warriors fell before his power. But fate has a way of correcting itself, even when it comes too late. The final battle had come. The Demon Slayer Corps, broken, bleeding, exhausted, had cornered him at last. Sunlight, the one thing that could end his immortal reign, was moments away. Muzan could feel it burning at the edges of the world, promising obliteration. He had always known this moment might come, yet standing on the precipice of his own extinction, the Demon King felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. Not fear of death, he had long accepted that possibility, but fear of meaninglessness. 1,000 years of evolution, of perfection, of becoming something beyond humanity, and it would all end as ash scattered by the morning wind. The sun crested the horizon. Muzan's body began to burn, his flesh bubbled and peeled, his perfect form crumbling like ancient parchment thrown into fire. He screamed not in pain but in rage, rage at the universe for making him mortal in this one way, rage at the humans who had hunted him with their insignificant lives, rage at himself for not finding the blue spider lily, for not achieving true perfection. And then something impossible happened. The world tore open. Between dimensions, reality split like fabric under too much strain. A crack formed in the air itself, a bleeding wound in existence that pulled at Muzan's disintegrating form. He had no time to understand, no time to resist. The void swallowed him whole, dragging him through layers of reality that were never meant to be crossed. When he fell through the other side, the sun was gone. Muzan crashed into cobblestone streets that reeked of brimstone and decay. His body, still burning, still dying, hit the ground with force that should have ended him. But here, wherever here was, the sunlight that had been killing him simply didn't exist. He gasped, drawing in air that tasted of sulfur and sin. Slowly, impossibly, his wounds began to heal. The burns reversed, flesh knitting back together with the horrifying efficiency that had made him immortal. Within moments, Muzan Kibutsuji stood whole again, his crimson eyes adjusting to this strange new world. He was in a city, but unlike any he had ever known. The architecture was twisted, buildings that defied logic stacked atop each other in impossible angles. The sky burned red, a perpetual twilight that held no sun. Strange creatures walked the streets, demons, he realized, but not like the ones he had created. These were different, chaotic, uncontrolled. And above it all, on a hill overlooking this nightmare landscape, stood a hotel. It was absurd, a grand structure with a sign that flickered in neon lights, Hazbin Hotel. Muzan's perfect mind processed this impossibility. He had fallen through reality itself and landed in, what, hell, another dimension. It didn't matter. What mattered was survival. What mattered was understanding. And what mattered most was power. Muzan took his first steps into this new world, his pristine white suit reforming around him like armor. Demons passed him on the street, creatures with horns, claws, tails, all manner of grotesque forms. They glanced at him with hunger, with violence in their eyes. They saw a newcomer, prey. They didn't see the apex predator that had just entered their domain. A demon, some low-level creature with shark-like teeth, approached him with a knife. "Nice suit, pretty boy. Hand over whatever you've got, or I'll..." The demon never finished his threat. Muzan's hand moved faster than thought, piercing through the creature's chest and crushing his heart. But unlike his own demons, this creature didn't disintegrate. Instead, he simply died, collapsed, mortal. "Interesting. Where am I?" Muzan asked the dying creature, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Pentagram City," the demon choked out. "You're in hell." Hell, the word resonated in Muzan's mind, a place of punishment for the wicked, a place where souls were sent after death. He looked down at his own hands, solid, real, alive. He wasn't dead, he shouldn't be here. Yet here he stood, in a realm that existed beyond the mortal world he had dominated for a millennium. The demon died at his feet. Muzan stepped over the corpse and continued walking. Other demons watched from shadows, but none approached. They could sense it now, the aura of something far older, far more dangerous than themselves. The Demon King moved through Hell's streets like a ghost from another nightmare entirely. He needed information. He needed to understand the rules of this place. and he needed to find out if there was a way back, or if this strange new world would become his next kingdom. The hotel on the hill called to him. Not literally, Muzan felt no mystical pull, but logically, a hotel in hell, a place that advertised itself so boldly. There would be answers there, or at minimum, someone who could provide them. As he approached the building, Muzan noticed something else, a feeling faint but familiar. Power, real power, not the desperate violence of street demons, but something older, something that reminded him of the strongest slayers he had faced, but twisted darker. The hotel doors stood before him, ornate and welcoming in a way that felt deeply wrong for hell. Muzan Kibutsuji, the demon king who had terrorized humanity for over 1,000 years, the creature who had never bowed to anyone, pushed open the doors and stepped inside. The lobby was cheerful, impossibly so. Bright colors, decorations, a sense of optimistic absurdity that made Muzan's eyes narrow in confusion, and behind the front desk stood a woman, or something that had been a woman once. She was pale, with blonde hair and rosy cheeks, dressed in a red suit. When she saw him enter, her face lit up with genuine joy. "Oh my gosh, a new guest. Welcome to the Hazbin Hotel. I'm Charlie Morningstar, and I'm so excited you're here." She practically bounced with enthusiasm. "Are you interested in redemption?" Muzan stared at her, his perfect mind struggling to process this bizarre creature. Redemption, in hell, the concept was absurd, and yet, there was something about her, something in her aura that spoke of power far beyond what her cheerful demeanor suggested. "I am new to this place," Muzan said carefully, his voice smooth as silk. "Perhaps you could explain what redemption means here." Charlie's smile somehow grew even brighter. "Of course, the Hazbin Hotel is dedicated to rehabilitating sinners so they can earn their way into heaven. Isn't that amazing? We believe that everyone deserves a second chance, even in hell." Muzan's crimson eyes studied her with the focus of a scientist examining a fascinating specimen. Heaven, hell, redemption. These were concepts he had heard in his mortal life 1,000 years ago, but here they were real, tangible. Before he could respond, another figure appeared from a side door. A tall, slender demon with red and black coloring, antlers sprouting from his head, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He moved with the grace of a predator, and when his gaze fell on Muzan, that smile widened. Well, the demon said, his voice crackling like an old radio. "What do we have here? A new soul so fresh I can't even smell the sulfur on him yet." He tilted his head, studying Muzan with eyes that burned with ancient malice. "Tell me, friend, what brings you to our humble establishment?" Muzan recognized a threat when he saw one. This creature, whatever he was, possessed real power, not the petty violence of street demons, but something refined, controlled, dangerous. "I am called Muzan," he replied, his voice never losing its calm, "and I find myself in unfamiliar territory. I seek understanding." The radio demon's grin grew impossibly wider. "Alastor, the radio demon, at your service, and understanding. Well, that's a currency far more valuable than souls in this place." The air between them crackled with unspoken challenge. Two apex predators, meeting for the first time, each recognizing in the other a creature that didn't belong at the bottom of any food chain. Charlie, oblivious or perhaps deliberately ignoring the tension, clapped her hands together. "This is perfect. Muzan, you can be our newest guest. We'll help you work through whatever brought you here, and together we can." "I am not dead," Muzan interrupted, his voice soft but absolute. "I do not belong here." Silence fell over the lobby. Charlie's enthusiasm faltered. "But everyone in hell is dead. That's how you get here. You can't just fall into hell while you're still alive." Muzan's eyes glowed crimson in the hotel's strange light. "Nevertheless, that is precisely what happened." And in that moment, as the three of them stood in the lobby of the Hazbin Hotel, fate's mistake began to ripple outward. A living demon king had entered a realm of the dead. A creature who had conquered his own world now stood in a dimension governed by entirely different rules. The question wasn't whether Muzan Kibutsuji would change hell. The question was whether hell could survive him. The impossible guest stood in the lobby of the Hazbin Hotel, and for the first time in centuries, Muzan Kibutsuji felt the uncomfortable sensation of being out of his depth. Charlie Morningstar had insisted, with an enthusiasm that bordered on aggressive cheerfulness, that he at least stay for one night while they figured things out. Muzan had agreed, not out of charity, but because his perfect tactical mind recognized the value of observatio. In this place, this hell operated on rules he didn't yet understand. Knowledge was power, and power was survival. The room they gave him was modest but clean, decorated in the same absurdly optimistic style as the rest of the hotel. Muzan stood at the window, looking out over Pentagram City as it sprawled beneath him like a cancer-given architectural form. The red sky never changed. No day, no night, no sun. No sun. For 1,000 years, sunlight had been his only true enemy, the one weakness in his otherwise perfect form, and now, in this realm of eternal twilight, that weakness simply didn't exist. A dark smile crossed Muzan's perfect features. Below in the hotel's common area, Charlie had gathered her small staff for an emergency meeting. The Princess of Hell sat at the head of a table, her usual optimism strained by the impossibility of their new guest. "So let me get this straight," said Vaggie, Charlie's girlfriend and the hotel's manager, her single eye narrowed with suspicion. "This Muzan guy just fell into hell while he was still alive. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works." "And yet here we are," Alastor chimed in, his radio-static voice dripping with amusement. He lounged in his chair like a king on a throne, clearly entertained by the chaos. A living soul in the land of the dead, how delightfully paradoxical. "Is he dangerous?" asked Angel Dust, the hotel's first and most reluctant guest. The spider demon had his own share of darkness, but even he could sense something wrong about the newcomer. "Without question," Alastor replied, his smile never wavering. "I felt it the moment he walked through those doors. Our new friend Muzan is no ordinary demon. He carries death in his very essence, not the theatrical death we practice here, but something older, purer." Charlie rubbed her temples, trying to process this. "But if he's alive, maybe we can help him get back to where he came from. That's good, right? That's helping someone, which is what we do." "Charlie," Vaggie's voice was gentle but firm. "Something that falls into hell doesn't usually fall by accident. Maybe we should be more concerned about why he's here." Upstairs, Muzan had come to the same conclusion. There had to be a reason for his displacement. The universe didn't make random errors. His fall through dimensions, the timing of it during his near-death experience, it reeked of cosmic intervention. But intervention by what? God, fate, some force he didn't yet comprehend. He needed information, and information meant exploration. Muzan left his room, moving silently through the hotel's corridors. His enhanced senses, so much more refined than any demon in this realm could imagine, picked up every heartbeat, every breath, every whispered conversation. The hotel had so few residents: Charlie, her girlfriend Vaggie, the radio demon Alastor, a spider-like creature called Angel Dust, a small cat demon named Husk who reeked of alcohol and regret, and a tiny cyclops maid named Nifty who seemed to exist in a state of perpetual chaos. A pathetic army for someone who claimed to want to reform hell. Muzan descended the stairs, finding Husk alone at the bar. The cat demon looked up, his eyes bloodshot and weary. "Great, another weirdo. What do you want?" "Information," Muzan replied simply, sliding onto a bar stool with practiced grace. "Tell me about this place, about hell, about those who rule it." Husk barked out a laugh. "Oh, you're one of those. New arrivals always want the same thing: knowledge, power, a way to climb the ladder." He poured himself another drink. "Fine, I'll give you the basics because Charlie would want me to be nice to guests, even creepy ones like you." Over the next hour, Husk painted a picture of hell's hierarchy. At the top sat Lucifer Morningstar, Charlie's father and the fallen angel himself. Below him were the 7 deadly sins, embodiments of humanity's greatest vices, and below them were the overlords, demons who had accumulated enough power to claim territory and souls. "And that's where it gets interesting," Husk continued, his words slightly slurred. "See, souls are currency here. When sinners die, they can make deals, give up their souls in exchange for power, protection, whatever. The overlords are the ones who collect. They're the real power in this city." Muzan absorbed every word with clinical precision. A hierarchy based on soul ownership. Power that could be transferred, accumulated, weaponized. It was elegant in its simplicity, and it gave him exactly what he needed, a framework to understand this world. "And Charlie," Muzan asked, "where does she fit in all this?" Husk's expression softened slightly. "Charlie's different. She actually gives a damn about redemption, thinks sinners can earn their way to heaven. Most people think she's crazy, but He trailed off, taking another drink. She's the real deal. Probably the only genuinely good person in all of hell. Good, Muzan Ray. Repeated the word like he was tasting something foreign, an interesting concept in a place designed for punishment. Yeah, well, that's Charlie for you, eternal optimist in a realm of eternal damnation. Husk studied Muzan with sharper eyes than his drunk demeanor suggested. What about you? What are you trying to get out of this place? I want what I have always wanted, Muzan replied, his voice soft as silk. To survive, to understand, to evolve. Before Husk could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Screams, gunfire, the sounds of violence that apparently passed for normal in this realm. Muzan moved to the window, watching as a group of demons attacked a smaller creature in the street. It was standard predator behavior, the strong consuming the weak, nothing he hadn't seen a million times before. But then Charlie burst through the hotel doors, her face set with determination. We have to help them, she declared. Charlie, no, Vaggie tried to stop her, but the princess was already running toward the violence. Muzan watched with clinical interest as Charlie placed herself between the attackers and their victim. She didn't fight, instead, she talked, pleaded, tried to appeal to whatever shred of humanity remained in creatures that had long since abandoned such things. And incredibly, impossibly, it worked. The attackers backed down, confused and disoriented by her genuine compassion. They slunk away, leaving their would-be victim alive. Charlie helped the wounded demon to their feet, offering them shelter in the hotel. That, Alastor said, appearing beside Muzan at the window, is the enigma of Charlotte Morningstar. She fights hell's nature with nothing but optimism and sincerity. Most find it nauseating, some find it inspiring, all find it utterly baffling. Muzan turned to face the radio demon. And you, what did you find it? Alastor's smile grew sharp. I find it entertaining. I also find you entertaining, dear Muzan, a living demon in a realm of the dead, a creature of such refined malice trying to understand a place built on chaos. Tell me, what was your life like before you fell through reality itself? Muzan considered the question. Normally, he would reveal nothing, would maintain the mystery that made him terrifying. But here, in a place where his reputation meant nothing, where his power was unproven, perhaps honesty served him better. I was a king, he said simply, the first of my kind, the strongest. For over 1,000 years, I stood at the apex of my world, unkillable and unstoppable, and then, in a single morning, I lost everything. How dramatic, Alastor replied, his voice crackling with static. And now you're here in our little hotel, surrounded by misfits trying to defy the very concept of damnation. What will you do, I wonder? Will you try to conquer hell as you conquered your world, or will something else catch your interest? Before Muzan could answer, Charlie returned with the rescued demon, her face still glowing with the satisfaction of having helped someone. She saw Muzan and Alastor at the window and bounded over with renewed enthusiasm. Muzan, you should have seen it. We helped someone today, actually made a difference. Her joy was infectious, almost painful in its sincerity. This is what the hotel is about, showing that redemption is possible, that we can be better than what hell expects us to be. Muzan looked at this strange, impossible princess. In his world, such optimism would have been crushed within days. Yet here she stood, maintained by whatever power her divine heritage granted her, believing in the impossible. You truly think souls can be redeemed, he said, not quite a question. I know they can, Charlie replied with absolute conviction. Everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone has good in them, even if it's buried deep down. We just have to help them find it. The Demon King studied her, his mind working through possibilities. In his old world, he had created demons through his blood, bound them to his will through fear and power. It had made him strong, but it had also made him isolated, surrounded by servants who hated him even as they obeyed. Here was a different approach. Charlie built loyalty through compassion, gathered followers through genuine care. It was alien to him, almost incomprehensible, and yet it worked. These misfits, broken as they were, stayed. They believed in her vision. I would like to learn more about your methods, Muzan said carefully, about this redemption you speak of. Charlie's face lit up like the sun he would never see again. Really? Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. We can start right away. I have so many activities planned, trust exercises, group sharing, arts and crafts. As she launched into an enthusiastic explanation of her rehabilitation program, Muzan felt Alastor's knowing gaze on him. The radio demon understood, even if Charlie didn't. Muzan wasn't interested in redemption, he was interested in understand. In a new form of power, a new way to manipulate and control. But as the Demon King stood in that absurd hotel, surrounded by impossible optimism and genuine compassion, something deep inside him, something he thought had died 1,000 years ago, stirred faintly. Not hope, never that, but curiosity. And for a creature who had lived for a millennium, curiosity was perhaps the most dangerous emotion of all. 3 days had passed since Muzan Kibutsuji arrived at the Hazbin Hotel, and hell was beginning to notice. Word spread quickly in Pentagram City. Whispers in dark alleys, rumors exchanged in the city's countless bars and drug dens. A new player had entered the game, a demon so refined, so perfectly controlled that even the overlords were taking notice. He didn't announce himself with violence or theatrics. He simply existed, and that existence itself was enough to draw attention. Muzan spent those first days observing, learning, and adapting. Charlie's redemption exercises were absurd: trust falls, sharing circles, arts and crafts designed to help demons process their trauma, but he participated with the patience of someone who had spent centuries perfecting the art of deception. He watched how the others reacted, how they opened up, how Charlie's relentless optimism slowly wore down their defenses. It was fascinating in the way a scientist finds a new bacterial culture fascinating. But on the 4th day, everything changed. The attack came without warning. A group of demons, thugs working for some minor overlord, kicked down the hotel's doors and stormed inside with guns and crude weapons. They had heard about the hotel's new guest, about the strange demon with pale skin and crimson eyes who carried himself like royalty. They wanted to establish dominance, to show this newcomer who really ran Pentagram City. They made a mistake that would echo through hell for years to come. Muzan was in the lobby when they entered, sitting calmly on one of Charlie's cheerfully colored sofas, a book about hell's history open in his lap. He looked up at the intruders with mild interest, the way one might observe insects crawling across a windowsill. "You've got some nerve, pretty boy," the lead demon snarled, a massive creature with horns and scales. "Strutting around our city like you own the place. Time to learn your place in the pecking order." Muzan closed his book carefully, placing it aside with deliberate precision. He stood, smoothing out his white suit with practiced grace. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle. "I have lived for over 1,000 years, he said. "In that time, I have been hunted by warriors who dedicated their entire lives to killing me. I have faced armies, I have survived the impossible. And you dare to threaten me." The late demon laughed, raising his gun. "Big talk from..." He never finished the sentence. Muzan moved. No one in the lobby could quite track what happened next. One moment he stood across the room, the next he was behind the lead demon, his hand extended. The creature fell apart, not torn or ripped, but perfectly dissected, as though reality itself had cut him into pieces. The other attackers opened fire, bullets shredding the air, but Muzan was no longer where they aimed. He flowed through the space like liquid shadow, each movement precise, efficient, beautiful in its terrible perfection. His flesh tentacles, a power he had developed over centuries, erupted from his body, moving faster than the eye could follow. Within seconds, it was over. The attackers lay dead or dying on the hotel's cheerful carpets, their blood staining Charlie's optimistic decorations. And Muzan stood in the center of the carnage, not a drop of blood on his white suit, his crimson eyes cold and calculating. "Good Lord," Alastor breathed, his permanent smile somehow wider. "That was spectacular." Charlie emerged from cover where Vaggie had pulled her, her face pale with shock. Not at the violence, she'd seen plenty of violence in hell, but at the precision of it, the clinical efficiency, the complete absence of passion or rage. "Muzan," she started, her voice shaking, you killed them." "They attacked your hotel," Muzan replied calmly, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "They threatened what you've built here. I merely eliminated the threat." "But we could have talked to them, we could have." "They came to kill Charlie," Vaggie interrupted, her practical nature overriding her girlfriend's optimism. "Muzan's right, they weren't here to negotiate." Angel Dust whistled low. Damn new guy, that was some serious power. You're not just some random sinner, are you? Muzan turned his cold gaze to the spider demon. I am what I have always been, perfection itself. The word hung in the air like a challenge, not boastful, not arrogant, simply stated as absolute fact. And looking at the carnage he had created without effort, without even breathing hard, no one in the room could argue. The attack had consequences beyond the immediate violence. Within hours, word reached the overlords. A new demon had massacred a crew in broad daylight, moving with speed and power that suggested something far beyond a standard sinner. The question rippling through Hell's power structure wasn't whether to respond, it was how. In a tower overlooking the city's entertainment district, Valentino, one of the overlords and the owner of several of Hell's most profitable enterprises, ground his cigarette into an ashtray with barely controlled rage. Some nobody comes to my city and starts making waves. He turned to his colleague, Velvet. What do we know about this Muzan character? Velvet scrolled through her phone, pulling up what little information Hell's social networks had gathered. Not much. Shows up at the hotel 4 days ago, keeps to himself. Charlie says he's from another dimension or some shit. She looked up, her expression sharp. But Val, the demons he killed, they weren't pushovers. He took them apart like tissue paper. Everyone bleeds, Valentino replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice. In another part of the city, Carmilla Carmine, the weapons dealer and one of Hell's most pragmatic overlords, was having a similar conversation with her daughters. A demon who claims to be from another dimension, she mused, studying reports of the hotel attack. With powers that don't match any known soul classification, either he's telling the truth or he's something we've never encountered before. Should we be worried, Mama? One of her daughters asked. Carmilla considered the question carefully. We should be careful. Power like that, unaligned and unexplained, it's a variable we can't account for. Back at the hotel, Muzan had cleaned himself up and returned to his room, leaving the staff to deal with the bodies and the aftermath. He stood at his window again, looking out over the city that was so different from his own world, yet operated on principles he understood perfectly. Strength, fear, control. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called. Charlie entered, her usual enthusiasm dampened but not extinguished. She held 2 cups of tea, offering one to Muzan with a small, sad smile. I wanted to thank you, she said quietly, for protecting the hotel. I know that this isn't easy for you, being here in a place that's so different from your world. Muzan accepted the tea, though he had no need for it. You disagree with my methods. I disagree with killing, Charlie replied honestly, but I also know that Hell is complicated. Sometimes violence is the only language demons understand. She sat on the edge of his bed, looking tired in a way that made her seem far older than her cheerful demeanor suggested. Can I ask you something? You may ask. When you were in your world before you came here, were you always like this, so controlled, so perfect? Muzan was silent for a long moment. It was a question no one had dared ask him in centuries. His demons had feared him too much. The Slayers had hated him too much. But this strange princess, with her impossible optimism, asked it with genuine curiosity. No, he finally answered, the word tasting strange on his tongue. Once I was human, weak, dying. I transformed myself to survive, to escape mortality, and in doing so I became what I needed to be, something beyond humanity's limitations. But at what cost? Charlie asked softly. Muzan turned to look at her, his crimson eyes meeting her gentle gaze. Everything. I lost everything to become perfect. My humanity, my ability to love, my connection to the world around me. I became isolated in my perfection, surrounded by servants who served out of fear rather than loyalty. He paused. Until I came here and met you. Charlie's eyes widened slightly. Me. You command loyalty through compassion. You build power through genuine care. It's alien to me, almost incomprehensible, yet it works. These broken souls follow you not because they fear you, but because they believe in you. Muzan set down his untouched tea. I want to understand that, to study it, perhaps even to learn if such a thing is possible for something like me. Everyone can change, Charlie said, her voice regaining some of its usual enthusiasm. That's what redemption means, not erasing who you were, but choosing to be better than you were. And if what I was is a monster who killed thousands, who created an empire of darkness spanning centuries, Muzan's voice remained calm, clinical. Can such a creature be redeemed? Charlie stood, placing a hand on his shoulder with surprising courage. I believe everyone deserves a chance to try, even demon kings from other dimensions. After she left, Muzan stood alone in his room, processing their conversation. Redemption, change, the possibility of becoming something other than the perfect predator he had crafted himself to be. It was absurd, impossible. And yet, for the first time in 1,000 years, Muzan Kibutsuji felt something he couldn't quite name. Not hope, that would be too far. Not regret, he had moved beyond such emotions centuries ago. But perhaps curiosity, about what Charlie saw when she looked at him, about whether her vision of redemption could apply even to something as ancient and terrible as himself. Outside his window, hell continued its eternal twilight, unaware that it had just welcomed a creature who would challenge everything it understood about power, control, and the nature of damnation itself. The Demon King had arrived. And hell would never be the same. The days that followed the attack transformed the Hazbin Hotel's dynamic. Muzan's display of power had established him as more than just another guest. He was now a guardian, whether Charlie liked it or not. Demons who once might have considered the hotel easy prey now thought twice. The Demon King's reputation spread through Pentagram City like a virus, his name whispered in the same breath as the overlords. But reputation alone couldn't answer the question that haunted Muzan's thoughts. Why was he here? He spent his mornings studying hell's structure, reading every book in the hotel's small library, absorbing information about the afterlife, about sin and punishment, about the cosmic order that governed this realm. He learned that souls arrived in hell based on their mortal sins, that redemption to heaven was theoretically possible but had never been accomplished, that the system was ancient and seemingly immutable. Yet he had arrived here without dying, without judgment, without any of the normal processes. It meant something, it had to mean something. In the afternoons, Charlie insisted he participate in her redemption activities. Today's exercise was particularly absurd. Each guest was supposed to share a moment from their mortal life that they regretted, a step toward processing their trauma and moving forward. Angel Dust went first, sharing a story about his addiction and how it had destroyed his relationship with his family. His voice cracked with genuine emotion, and Charlie held his hand through it, her empathy absolute. Husk followed, talking about his gambling problem, how he'd bet away everything including his own soul. The cat demon's shame was palpable, his usual gruff exterior stripped away. Even Alastor participated, though his story was suspiciously vague and probably entirely fabricated, told with his characteristic smile and radiostatic voice. And then it was Muzan's turn. The Demon King sat in the circle, perfectly still, his crimson eyes scanning the faces around him. These broken souls, sharing their pain so openly, it was weakness by his old standards. Vulnerability was something to be exploited, not celebrated. But Charlie's gentle encouragement, her genuine belief that this process mattered, it created a strange pressure he couldn't quite rationalize away. I was dying, Muzan began, his voice soft. Over 1,000 years ago, when I was still human, my body was failing, rotting from within. The doctors said I would not see my next birthday. I was 20 years old and death was coming for me. The room was silent, everyone leaning in to hear. A doctor and experimental practitioner offered me a treatment, something untested, dangerous, but with the potential to cure me completely. I accepted because I refused to die. I refused to let my life end before it had truly begun. Muzan's hands clenched slightly. The treatment worked, my disease was cured, but it also transformed me into something else, something that could no longer walk in sunlight, something that needed to consume human flesh to survive. Charlie's expression was a mixture of horror and compassion. You became what you are now. Yes, I became the first demon of my world, and in my desperation to survive, to maintain my new existence, I created others like me. I spread my curse like a plague, turned thousands into demons bound to my will. Muzan looked down at his perfect hands. I told myself it was necessary, that my survival justified any cost, but the truth is simpler and more terrible. I was afraid of death, afraid of weakness, afraid of being anything less than perfect. And your regret, Charlie prompted gently. Muzan was quiet for a long moment. I regret that in pursuing immortality, I forgot what it meant to be alive. I existed for 1,000 years, but I didn't live. I had power beyond measure, but no joy in it. I commanded demons without number, but had no genuine connection to any living thing. He looked up, meeting Charlie's eyes. I became perfect, and in doing so, I became nothing. The confession hung in the air, more honest than Muzan had intended. Something about this place, about Charlie's unwavering belief in redemption, had pried open a door he'd kept sealed for centuries. "That's the first step," Charlie said, her voice warm with encouragement. "Recognize. NG what we've lost, understanding the cost of our choices. From there, we can start to rebuild." But before the moment could deepen, the hotel's doors burst open. A small demon, terrified and bleeding, stumbled inside. "Please," the creature gasped, "they're after me. The overlords sent them. I need sanctuary." Vaggie moved immediately to secure the doors while Charlie helped the injured demon to a couch. "Who's after you? What happened?" I tried to break my soul contract, tried to escape from Valentino's control." The demon's eyes were wide with terror. "But you can't escape the contracts. They sent enforcers. They'll kill anyone who helps me." As if on cue, the sound of vehicles pulling up outside reached them. Through the windows, they could see demons armed with serious weaponry, surrounding the hotel. "Come out, little rabbit," a voice called through a megaphone, "and send out whoever's harboring you. The overlords want a word with your new guardian." Muzan rose from his seat, his demeanor shifting from vulnerable confessor to apex predator in an instant. "They've come for me." "No," Charlie said firmly. "This is my hotel. If they want to make demands, they go through me." But Muzan was already walking toward the door, his movements liquid and graceful. "Stay inside, Charlie. This doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't." She moved to follow him, but Vaggie held her back. "Let him handle it," the moth demon said quietly. "I think he needs this." Muzan stepped outside into hell's red twilight. The demons surrounded him, at least 24, armed with everything from automatic weapons to magical artifacts. In the center stood a tall, elegant demon in a red suit, one of Valentino's lieutenants. "So you're the one making waves in our city," the lieutenant said, looking Muzan up and down. "The overlords are curious about you, stranger. They want to know where you came from, what you want, and why you think you can operate in Pentagram City without paying respects." "I operate where I choose," Muzan replied calmly, "and I owe respect to no one." The lieutenant's smile turned predatory. "Wrong answer." At his signal, the armed demons opened fire. But Muzan was already moving. What happened next would be talked about in Hell's bars and back alleys for months. The Demon King moved through the hail of bullets like they were rain, his flesh tentacles erupting from his body in a horrifying display of power. Where they touched demons, those creatures didn't just die, they dissolved, their very essence torn apart by something far more potent than Hell's usual violence. Within 30 seconds, half the attackers were dead. Within a minute, only the lieutenant remained, backed against a wall, his face twisted in terror. What are you?" he gasped. Muzan's hand was around his throat before the demon could blink. "I am Muzan Kibutsuji. I am the first demon, the Demon King, a creature who has survived for over 1,000 years. And you," he tightened his grip slightly, "you are nothing." "Wait," Charlie's voice stopped him. She had come outside despite Vaggie's protests, her face pale but determined. "Don't kill him, please." Muzan turned his cold gaze to her. "He came to kill me, to destroy your hotel. Why should he be spared?" "Because that's not who we are here," Charlie replied, her voice steady despite the violence surrounding them. "Because if you kill him, you're just proving the overlords right. That might makes right. That power is the only thing that matters. But if you let him go, if you show mercy, that means something." "Mercy," Muzan repeated the word like it was foreign. "Mercy is weakness." "No," Charlie said, stepping closer. "Mercy is strength. It's choosing to be better than your circumstances. It's the first real step toward redemption." Muzan studied her, this impossible princess who genuinely believed in the power of compassion even in hell itself. Every instinct he had developed over a millennium screamed at him to kill the lieutenant, to eliminate the threat completely. That was survival. That was logic. But logic had kept him alive and alone for 1,000 years. Slowly, Muzan released his grip. The lieutenant collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Tell your masters, Muzan said quietly, that the Hazbin Hotel is under my protection. Any further attacks will end the same way, except I won't be so merciful next time. The lieutenant scrambled away, disappearing into Pentagram City's streets with the terror of someone who had just glimpsed something beyond his understanding. Charlie let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Thank you. Don't thank me, Muzan replied, his voice hollow. I didn't spare him out of compassion. I did it because you asked, because, he trailed off, struggling with words for concepts he barely understood, because perhaps you're right, perhaps there is another way. They stood together in the aftermath of violence, surrounded by bodies that Ray already dissolving into hell's essence. The price of redemption, Muzan was learning, wasn't just about admitting past sins. It was about choosing differently in the present, even when every instinct screamed otherwise. This is going to have consequences, Vaggie said, emerging from the hotel with the others. You just declared war on the overlords. Let them come, Muzan replied with absolute confidence. I have survived far worse than anything hell can throw at me. But as they returned to the hotel, as Charlie immediately began tending to the injured demon who had sought sanctuary, Muzan felt that strange, uncomfortable sensation again. That pressure in his chest that felt almost like not warmth, not quite, but perhaps the memory of what warmth once felt like. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Demon King wondered if survival alone was enough, if perfection without purpose was really perfection at all. Charlie's redemption program had seemed absurd when he first arrived, but now, standing in hell's twilight, surrounded by broken souls who chose to believe in something better. Now it seemed like the most dangerous idea he'd ever encountered. Because unlike the Demon Slayer Corps who had hunted him with swords and determination, Charlie was trying to change him from the inside out, not through force but through example. And Muzan Kibutsuji was beginning to realize that might be the most terrifying threat of all. The streets of Pentagram City whispered with a new kind of fear. 2 weeks had passed since Muzan Kibutsuji declared the Hazbin Hotel under his protection, and the balance of power in hell had begun to shift in ways no one could have predicted. The overlords, those ancient demons who had ruled through fear and soul contracts for centuries, found themselves facing an unprecedented challenge. A demon who couldn't be bought, couldn't be intimidated, and most disturbing of all, couldn't be understood. In the V-Tower, the headquarters of the V's, Valentino, Vox, and Velvet, 3 of Hell's most influential overlords gathered around a holographic display showing surveillance footage of the Hazbin Hotel. Their faces reflected varying degrees of concern and rage. He killed 27 demons in under 2 minutes, Vox said, his television screen face flickering with static. The footage doesn't even fully capture how he moved. It's like watching something that shouldn't exist in our reality. Valentino crushed another cigarette, his rage barely contained. I don't care if he's from another dimension or if he's Satan's secret bastard. Nobody humiliates my organization and lives to tell about it. You're not thinking clearly, Val, Velvet interjected, her eyes never leaving her phone as she scrolled through Hell's social media. This Muzan character is trending across every platform. Demons are calling him the perfect demon, the timeless one. He's becoming a legend, and legends are dangerous. Then we destroy the legend, Valentino snarled. We hit the hotel with everything we have, overwhelming force, no survivors. And risk making him a martyr, Vox shook his head. No, we need to be smarter. We need to understand what he wants, what drives him. Every demon has a price, power, souls, territory. We find his price, and we either buy him or destroy him from within. Back at the Hazbin Hotel, Muzan was discovering that his protection came with unexpected complications. Demons seeking sanctuary began arriving in increasing numbers, all of them fleeing contracts, violence, or the chaos of Hell's streets. Charlie welcomed each one with her characteristic enthusiasm, seeing them as potential success stories for her redemption program. But Muzan saw something else, vulnerability. Every new demon was a potential threat, a possible spy for the overlords, or simply another liability to protect. His tactical mind, honed over 1,000 years of survival, screamed warnings that Charlie refused to hear. We can't just turn them away, Charlie argued during one of their increasingly frequent debates. These souls are reaching out for help. Isn't that what redemption is about, giving people a chance? Your compassion will get everyone in this hotel killed, Muzan replied, his voice cold but not cruel. You're building an empire of the weak, sheltering demons who can't survive on their own. The overlords will see this as both an insult and an opportunity. Then we make them understand that there's a better way. Charlie's optimism was as unshakable as ever. If we can show that redemption works, that demons can change, then maybe the whole system can change. Muzan studied her, this impossible princess who genuinely believed she could reform hell itself. You're naive, Charlie. Systems built on suffering don't change because someone asks nicely. They change through force or collapse entirely. Then maybe it's time for a collapse, a new voice interjected. They both turned to find Alastor Anning against the doorframe, his perpetual smile somehow more knowing than usual. The radio demon had been watching the growing tensions with clear amusement, treating the entire situation like a fascinating social experiment. My dear Muzan, Alastor continued, his voice crackling with static, you're approaching this all wrong. You see Charlie's compassion as weakness, but I've observed something far more interesting. Her genuine belief in redemption is making demons question their own choices. That's more dangerous to the overlords than any display of power. Explain, Muzan demanded. Alastor manifested a holographic image with a wave of his hand, a map of Pentagram City with various markers. The overlords maintain control through soul contracts and fear, but what happens when demons start believing they don't have to accept that system? When they see an alternative, no matter how absurd, his smile widened. Revolution, my friend, not through violence but through choice. Muzan absorbed this perspective, his perfect mind processing the implications. It was true, he had seen it in his own world. The Demon Slayer Corps had been dangerous not just because of their fighting skills, but because they represented an alternative to his dominion. Hope, properly weaponized, was more threatening than any sword. But revolution requires protection, Muzan said slowly. These demons seeking sanctuary are weak individually. They need time to grow stronger, to learn to survive without their contracts. Exactly, Charlie practically bounced with enthusiasm, which is why your protection is so important. You're giving them that time, that space to change. Before Muzan could respond, Vaggie burst into the room, her face tight with worry. We have a problem, a big one. Outside the hotel, a crowd had gathered, not attackers this time, but petitioners, hundreds of demons who had heard about the sanctuary the hotel offered. They filled the street, a sea of desperate faces seeking salvation from hell's cruelty. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Muzan asked Charlie quietly, a chance to save them all. Charlie looked at the crowd, her expression a mixture of joy and fear. Yes, but I didn't think it would happen so fast. I don't know if we have the resources, the space, Then we expand, Muzan interrupted. Your hotel is too small for what you're trying to accomplish. You need more territory, more resources, more power. He turned to face her directly, and that means dealing with the overlords directly. That evening, Muzan did something he hadn't done since arriving in hell. He ventured into Pentagram City alone, not to hunt, not to fight, but to observe. He moved through the streets like a ghost, his presence barely registering to the demons who passed him. He watched how the city operated, the soul contracts being negotiated in back alleys, the violence that erupted without warning or reason. The way the strong preyed on the weak with casual brutality. It was familiar, a more chaotic version of the world he had created in his own dimension. But there were differences too. Here, the victims sometimes fought back. Sometimes they found creative ways to survive. And increasingly, they whispered about the hotel on the hill, about Princess Charlie's impossible dream, about the perfect demon who protected those seeking redemption. Muzan found himself in a bar on the edge of the entertainment district. It was a rough establishment, frequented by demons who had nothing left to lose. He sat at the bar, ordered a drink he wouldn't consume, and listened. Heard about another group heading to that hotel, one demon muttered to his companion. Valentino's losing contracts left and right, souls that would rather risk redemption than stay under his control. Can't blame them, the companion replied. Val's a monster even by hell's standards, but that new demon, that Muzan guy, I heard he's worse, killed an entire crew without breaking a sweat. Maybe worse is what we need. Maybe it takes a monster to protect us from monsters. Muzan absorbed these words, turning them over in his mind. In his old world, he had been feared absolutely. Demons served him because they had no choice. Humans hunted him because they had no alternative, but here he was becoming something else, a symbol, a guardian, a monster who protected other monsters. It was absurd, it was contrary to everything he had built himself to be. And yet, sitting in that hell bar listening to demons speak his name with something other than pure terror, it felt significant. "You're Muzan." The voice came from beside him. Muzan turned to find a female demon with sharp features and calculating eyes. She was well-dressed, professional, clearly someone with power and resources. "I am," he confirmed. Carmilla Carmine, she introduced herself, extending a hand that Muzan didn't shake. She withdrew it without offense. "I'm an overlord, weapons manufacturer primarily, IW. Anted to meet you before the others made their move." "And what move is that?" Carmilla signaled the bartender for a drink before answering. "The V's want you dead or controlled. They see you as a threat to their business model, but I see something different." She took a sip of her drink. "I see a tactical mind, someone who understands that power without purpose is just chaos." "What do you want from me?" Muzan asked directly. "Information primarily. Where did you come from? Why are you protecting Charlie's hotel? What do you actually want from hell?" Carmilla's gaze was sharp, analytical. "Because from where I'm standing, you don't act like someone who believes in redemption. You act like someone playing a much longer game." Muzan considered his response carefully. This demon was intelligent, possibly dangerous, and clearly operated on a different level than the street thugs who had attacked him before. "I came from another dimension," he said, deciding partial truth served him better than deception. "A world where I was the apex predator, the first and strongest demon. I fell through reality during a battle and found myself here." "And the hotel?" A curiosity at first, then an opportunity to understand this realm's unique power structure. Muzan's eyes met hers, but something unexpected happened. "I began to see value in Charlie's approach, not because I believe in redemption, but because I recognize the strategic value of loyalty built through genuine care rather than fear." Carmilla nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. You're not a believer, you're a student. You're learning a new system." She leaned closer. "Let me give you some advice, student to student. The overlords aren't going to let this continue. Charlie's hotel was a joke before you arrived, something to be mocked but not feared. Now it's becoming a legitimate threat to the system. They will move against you, and when they do, it will be with everything they have." "Let them come," Muzan replied with absolute confidence. "I have survived worse than anything hell can produce." "Perhaps," Carmilla stood, preparing to leave. "But hell isn't about survival, Muzan, it's about eternal suffering. Even you, with all your power, haven't experienced what it means to be truly trapped here. No escape, no respite, just existence stretching into infinity." She left him with those words, disappearing into the bar's shadows. Muzan sat alone, processing the conversation. Carmilla was right about one thing: he didn't fully understand hell yet. He had approached it like any other territory to be conquered or understood, but this was different. This was a cosmic prison, a realm designed specifically for punishment and suffering. And yet Charlie believed it could be changed. She believed souls could earn redemption, could escape to heaven. It seemed impossible, but so did falling through dimensions into an afterlife he wasn't supposed to access. When Muzan returned to the hotel, he found chaos. The crowd of petitioners had grown larger, and some of Charlie's existing guests were having difficulty adapting to the sudden influx. Arguments broke out, resources grew strained. The hotel's fragile peace threatened to collapse under the weight of its own success. Muzan watched from the doorway as Charlie tried desperately to maintain order, her optimism finally showing cracks under the pressure. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, trying to be everything to everyone and failing. Without conscious thought, Muzan found himself stepping forward. His presence alone quieted the crowd. The sheer weight of power he carried made even desperate demons pause. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "You came here seeking sanctuary," he said, his words reaching every ear. "Princess Charlie has offered you that sanctuary, but sanctuary comes with responsibility. You will follow the rules of this hotel. You will participate in the redemption program. You will prove yourselves worthy of the protection offered here." He paused, letting his crimson eyes scan the crowd. "And understand this, I am not merciful, I am not kind. I protect this hotel because I choose to, but that protection extends only to those who respect what is being built here. Cause trouble, threaten the peace, betray the trust given to you. His eyes glowed with ancient malice. "And you will discover exactly why I am called the Demon King." The crowd was silent, cowed by the pure predatory dominance in his words, but alongside the fear, Muzan sensed something else: relief. These demons wanted structure, wanted rules, wanted someone strong enough to enforce the order that made change possible. Charlie approached him as the crowd began to disperse, organized now by Vaggie and the other staff. Her face showed exhaustion but also gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I was losing control. I thought I could handle it all myself." "You can't," Muzan replied honestly. "You're trying to change hell. With optimism and good intentions. Those are valuable, but they're not enough. You need strength to back up your compassion. You need someone willing to be the monster so you don't have to be." Charlie looked up at him, really looked at him, and for the first time seemed to see past the perfect exterior to something deeper. "Is that what you are, our monster?" "I am what I have always been," Muzan said. "The question is whether that can serve a purpose beyond my own survival." High above the city, in the V Tower, Valentina watched surveillance footage of Muzan addressing the crowd, his face twisted with rage and something that might have been fear. "He's turning them into an army," he snarled. "No," Vox corrected, his screen face displaying a complex analysis. "He's turning them into believers. That's far more dangerous." And in the shadows between dimensions, something ancient stirred, something that had noticed the impossible, a living demon in the realm of the dead, a creature that had cheated fate itself. Forces beyond the overlords, beyond even hell's established hierarchy, began to take interest in Muzan Kibutsuji. Because in a universe governed by cosmic law, anomalies were either corrected, or they became catalysts for something far greater. The Demon King had become a symbol, and symbols once created could never truly be destroyed. They could only evolve. 3 weeks after establishing his protection over the Hazbin Hotel, Muzan Kibutsuji received his first formal invitation from an overlord. The message arrived via a black envelope, sealed with wax that burned cold to the touch. Inside, elegant script invited him to a meeting at the Carmine estate, with assurances of safe passage and neutral ground. It was signed by Carmilla Carmine herself. "It's a trap," Vaggie stated flatly, standing in Charlie's office as they examined the invitation. "The overlords don't do neutral meetings. They do ambushes disguised as negotiations." Muzan studied the invitation with clinical precision. "Perhaps, but Carmilla Carmine is different from the others. She deals in weapons and information, operates on logic rather than emotion. This meeting serves a purpose." "And if you're wrong," Charlie asked, worry evident in her voice, "if they're setting you up?" "Then they'll learn the same lesson every other creature who has underestimated me has learned." Muzan's voice carried absolute confidence. "I accept." The Carmine estate sat in one of Hell's more refined districts, a sprawling mansion that spoke of old power and careful cultivation. Unlike the chaotic architecture that dominated most of Pentagram City, this building had purpose, symmetry, elegance. It reminded Muzan of his own compounds from his previous life, places built not for display, but for function. He arrived alone, as requested, walking through gates that opened at his approach. Carmilla's daughters, Clara and Odette, met him at the entrance, both regarding him with cautious respect. "Mother is expecting you in the observatory," Clara said, gesturing toward a spiral staircase. "Please follow us." They led him through hallways lined with weapons, angelic steel, the only material that could truly kill demons in hell. Muzan's perfect mind catalogued each piece, understanding immediately why Carmilla held such influence. She controlled the means of permanent death in a realm of immortals. The observatory was a circular room with a glass ceiling revealing hell's red sky. Carmilla waited there, along with 2 other demons Muzan didn't recognize, a shark-like creature and a female demon with a fox-like appearance. "Thank you for coming," Carmilla said, gesturing to a seat at a round table. "Please join us, we have much to discuss." Muzan remained standing. "State your purpose." "Direct, I appreciate that," Carmilla nodded to her companions. "This is Rosi, who controls the cannibal colony, and Zestial, one of Hell's oldest overlords. We represent a faction separate from the V's, those of us who believe stability serves Hell better than chaos." "And you see me as an element of stability." Muzan's tone suggested he found this amusing. We see you as a variable, Zestial replied, his archaic speech patterns marking him as truly ancient. One that could tip the scales toward order or chaos depending on thy choices. The V's seek thy destruction or submission. We offer something else. An alliance, Rosi added with a sharp smile, or more accurately, a contract of mutual benefit. Muzan's eyes narrowed. I do not make contracts. In my experience, they serve only those who write them. Smart man, Carmilla acknowledged, but hear our proposal before you refuse. The hotel you protect is growing rapidly. Charlie's redemption program is attracting demons at an unprecedented rate. This threatens the existing power structure, not just the V's, but all of us. Why should I care about your power structure? Muzan asked coldly. Because when the V's move against you, it won't be with street thugs and intimidation, Carmilla replied. It will be with resources that can threaten even your considerable power, angelic weapons, coordinated attacks from multiple overlords, perhaps even intervention from higher powers. She pulled out a blueprint, spreading it across the table. Muzan's eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of his surprise. The blueprint showed the Hazbin Hotel surrounded by detailed tactical markings, attack vectors, weak points. This is Valentino's plan, Carmilla continued. A coordinated strike involving 3 overlord factions, over 500 demons, and enough angelic steel to kill everyone in that hotel 10 times over. He's tired of being humiliated. He wants you destroyed, and he's willing to pay any price to make it happen. Muzan studied the blueprint, his tactical mind immediately identifying the strengths and weaknesses of the proposed attack. When? 3 days from now, during the hotel's open house event that Charlie announced. Carmilla's expression was grave. He's going to turn your moment of vulnerability into a massacre, unless, Muzan's voice was dangerously soft. Unless you accept our help, we provide intelligence, defensive support, even our own forces to counter the attack. In exchange, you agree to certain limitations on the hotel's expansion and influence, boundaries that keep Charlie's little experiment from growing large enough to threaten the entire system. Silence fell over the observatory. Outside, hell's red sky flickered with distant violence, the eternal background noise of damnation. Muzan turned to face Carmilla directly. You want me to cage Charlie's dream, to accept that redemption can exist only in a controlled, limited form that doesn't threaten your power. We want survival, Carmilla corrected. For everyone, Charlie's idealism is admirable, but if she pushes too hard, too fast, the entire system could collapse. And when systems collapse in hell, the result is suffering on a scale you can't imagine. I have imagined suffering on cosmic scales, Muzan replied quietly. I've inflicted it, and I've learned that systems built on suffering eventually devour themselves. Zestial leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying Muzan with unexpected insight. Thou speakest as one who hath borne witness to empire's fall. What lesson didst thou draw from such devastation? Muzan was silent for a long moment, memories of his final battle flooding back, the Demon Slayer Corps throwing themselves against him with suicidal determination, the sunrise that should have been his death, the sensation of everything he'd built crumbling as his body burned. I learned that absolute control is an illusion, he finally said, that no matter how perfect you become, how powerful, how unkillable, eventually something breaks through, eventually the world finds a way to end you. Then thou understandest our position, Zestial replied. We do not seek absolute control, merely sufficient influence to maintain order. What we offer is not limitation, but protection. Protection that comes with chains, Muzan said. No, I refuse your contract. Carmilla's expression hardened. Then you're condemning everyone in that hotel to death. The attack is coming, Muzan. We've given you the intelligence because we respect your power and hoped you'd see reason. But make no mistake, we won't intervene if you reject our terms. I don't need your intervention. Muzan moved toward the door, then paused. But I appreciate the intelligence. It confirms something I've suspected since arriving in this realm. And what is that? Rosi asked. That hell's overlords are afraid, not of me specifically, but of what I represent, the possibility of change. You've built a comfortable empire on the backs of suffering souls, and now something threatens that comfort. He looked back at them, his crimson eyes glowing with cold assessment. You're right to be afraid, because change is coming, whether you want it or not. He left the observatory, walking through the halls of weapons with unhurried steps. Carmilla's daughters escorted him out in silence, their faces unreadable. But as Muzan stepped back onto Pentagram City streets, he felt it, multiple presences tracking him from the shadows. Carmilla's meeting hadn't been just a negotiation. It had been a test, a way to observe him, to gauge his reactions and capabilities. The overlords were positioning their pieces. The attack was coming, and Muzan Kibutsuji had just rejected the only alliance that might have protected the hotel. Back at the Hazbin Hotel, Charlie was preparing for the open house with her characteristic enthusiasm. She had no idea that in 3 days, the event would become a battlefield. No idea that her dream of redemption was about to face its greatest test. Muzan found her in the lobby, directing decorations with Nifty while Vaggie managed logistics. She smiled when she saw him, that genuine warmth that never failed to unsettle him. "How was the meeting?" she asked. "Informative," Muzan replied. Then, after a moment's consideration, "We need to talk privately." In Charlie's office, he laid out everything: the planned attack, Carmilla's offer, his rejection of the contract. He watched her face shift from shock to fear to determination. 3 days, she whispered. "They're going to attack during the open house with angelic weapons." She looked up at him. "We should cancel it, evacuate everyone, hide until—" "No," Muzan interrupted. "We don't hide, we prepare." "But Carmilla said there would be hundreds of them. Angelic steel, how can we possibly—" "Charlie," Muzan's voice was soft but absolute. "I have faced armies before. I have survived the unsurvivable. 3 days is more than enough time to turn this hotel into a fortress and train those willing to defend it." "I don't want people to die protecting my dream," Charlie said, tears forming in her eyes. "Then we make sure they don't," Muzan replied. "But that means accepting something you've resisted, that sometimes compassion requires strength. That redemption can't exist without the power to defend it." He moved to the window, looking out over the growing crowds of demons seeking sanctuary. "You asked me once what I was. I told you I was a monster, but perhaps I can be your monster, the one who does what you cannot do, who bears the weight you cannot bear, so that your dream survives." Charlie joined him at the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "If we do this, if we fight, it changes everything. The hotel won't be just about redemption anymore. It'll be about war." "It was always going to be about war," Muzan said quietly. "The moment you decided to challenge Hell's system, you declared war. You just did it with kindness instead of violence. But war has found you anyway, Charlie. The only question is whether you'll face it or flee from it." Charlie was quiet for a long moment, watching the demons below, broken souls seeking something better, believing in the impossible because she had given them permission to hope. "Then we fight," she said finally, her voice steady. "We protect what we've built. We show Hell that redemption is worth defending." She looked at Muzan. "But we do it my way. We don't become the monsters we're fighting against. We defend, but we don't massacre. We survive, but we don't lose ourselves in the process." Muzan studied her, this impossible princess who could make even him question 1,000 years of accumulated wisdom. Agreed, on one condition. "What condition?" "When the battle comes, you let me do what I was made to do. You've asked me to learn compassion, to understand redemption, to become something more than the monster I was. But there's a reason I survived for a millennium, Charlie. There's a reason I stood as the apex predator in my world." His eyes glowed crimson in the fading light. "When they come for us, let me be that creature again. Let me protect your dream with everything I am, without restraint or mercy for those who would destroy it." Charlie met his gaze, understanding the weight of what he was asking. Permission to unleash the Demon King in all his terrible glory, to become the monster that nightmares feared. "Protect them," she said finally. "Protect everyone seeking sanctuary here. Do what you have to do, but Muzan." She placed a hand on his arm, her touch somehow not burning despite his demonic nature. "Don't lose yourself in the process. You've come too far, learned too much. Promise me that when the battle ends, you'll still be you, not just the monster, but the person underneath trying to understand what it means to change." Muzan looked at her hand on his arm, felt the warmth of genuine human contact for the first time in centuries. Something inside him, something he thought had died long ago, stirred painfully. "I promise," he said, and meant it. The next 3 days transformed the Hazbin Hotel into something unprecedented in Hell, a fortress built not on fear, but on collective determination. Muzan trained those willing to fight, teaching them tactics and strategies refined over centuries of warfare. Vagi organized defensive positions. Angel Dust used his connections to acquire weapons and intelligence. Even Alastor, enigmatic as ever, contributed his considerable power to reinforcing the hotel's defenses. And Charlie, despite her pacifist nature, stood at the center of it all, a beacon of hope that made even the most cynical demons believe survival was possible. On the third morning, as Hell's red sky began its simulation of dawn, 500 demons armed with angelic weapons surrounded the Hazbin Hotel. At their head stood Valentino, his face twisted with rage and anticipation. Beside him, Vox coordinated communications while Velvet broadcast the coming massacre to all of Pentagram City. "This ends today," Valentino declared, his voice carrying across the killing crew. "ND, the hotel falls, the princess's little dream dies, and that freak from another dimension learns what happens when you challenge Hell's overlords." Inside the hotel, Muzan stood at the highest window, looking down at the army arrayed against them. Behind him, Charlie and her staff prepared for the worst. "Are you ready?" Charlie asked quietly. Muzan's flesh rippled, his demonic power stirring after weeks of restraint. His eyes burned crimson, and for the first time since arriving in Hell, he allowed his full presence to manifest, the weight of 1,000 years of predatory evolution, the aura of something that had conquered death itself. "I am what I have always been," he replied, his voice carrying echoes of ancient malice. "But now I fight for something beyond survival. Now I defend something worth preserving." He turned to face the coming battle, and his smile was terrifying, not cruel, but absolutely confident. "Let them come," Muzan Kibutsuji said. "Let them learn why I am called the Demon King." And as the first wave of attackers charged the hotel, as angelic steel glinted in Hell's red light, as the battle for redemption's future began. The perfect demon descended from his perch like a nightmare given form, and Hell itself trembled at the force he unleashed. The battle began with fire and fury. Valentino's army crashed against the Hazbin Hotel like a wave against stone, 500 demons strong, armed with weapons that could kill immortals. But they had made a critical miscalculation. They had expected a desperate defense, a futile last stand. They had not expected Muzan Kibutsuji to meet them head-on. The Demon King descended from the hotel like a falling star, his form shifting mid-flight as his flesh erupted into dozens of blade-like appendages. He hit the first wave of attackers with force that sent demons flying, their bodies torn apart before they could even scream. "Advance," Valentino roared, refusing to let shock stop his momentum. "He's only one demon, overwhelming numbers, push forward." But numbers had never mattered to Muzan. In his previous life, he had faced the entire Demon Slayer Corps, hundreds of warriors trained specifically to kill him. He had survived them all. These hell demons, powerful though they were, lacked the coordination, the dedication, the sheer suicidal determination of his old enemies. Muzan moved through their ranks like death personified. His flesh morphs adapted instantaneously to each threat, hardening to deflect bullets, extending to impale attackers, shifting into defensive walls when angelic steel came too close. Unlike his demons from the old world, he had no weakness to sunlight here, no limitation, nothing holding back his full power. From the hotel's fortified positions, Charlie watched in horrified awe. She had known Muzan was powerful, had seen glimpses of it in previous fights, but this was something else entirely. This was an apex predator operating without restraint, a creature who had perfected violence over a millennium. "He's not even trying," Alastor observed, his permanent smile somehow impressed. "That's not his full power. He's testing them, learning their capabilities before he truly engages." "We need to help him," Charlie said, preparing to join the fight. Vagi grabbed her arm. "No, this is what he does, Charlie. This is what he is. Our job is to protect the demons inside the hotel who can't fight." As if summoning her words to life, a squad of attackers broke through Muzan's perimeter, charging for the hotel's main entrance. But they were met by a defensive line led by Angel Dust, Vagi, and surprisingly, several of the hotel's guests who had chosen to fight for their sanctuary. "Nobody gets through this door," Angel Dust shouted, his multiple arms wielding weapons with practiced precision. "This is our home, our chance, and we're not letting some overlord's thugs take it away." The battle split into two fronts, Muzan's one-man war against the main force and the hotel's defenders protecting their home. Both sides fought with desperate determination, but for fundamentally different reasons. Valentino's forces fought for money and fear of their master. The hotel's defenders fought for hope. Midway through the battle, something changed. Muzan had carved through over 100 demons, his body covered in wounds that healed almost instantly, when Valentino revealed his trump card. Now, the Overlord commanded. From the sky, a dozen demons descended. These were different from the cannon fodder. These carried angelic spears, war armor forged from blessed materials, and moved with the precision of trained assassins. These were Valentino's elite, demons who had killed other demons for centuries. They attacked Muzan in perfect coordination, their angelic weapons seeking his vital points. For the first time in the battle, Muzan was forced to retreat, to defend rather than attack. Angelic steel could hurt him, could potentially kill him if it pierced correctly. "There it is," Vox crowed through the broadcasting equipment. "The perfect demon bleeds, he's not invincible, press the attack." But Vox had misunderstood what he was witnessing. Muzan hadn't retreated out of fear, he had retreated to learn. He studied the elite fighters, analyzed their movements, identified the patterns in their coordination. And then he evolved. Muzan's body shifted in ways that defied Hell's physics. His flesh became simultaneously harder and more fluid, creating armor that deflected angelic steel while maintaining mobility. His tentacles multiplied, each one moving independently, turning him into a whirlwind of blades that attacked from every angle simultaneously. In less than 2 minutes, all 12 elite fighters lay dead. "Impossible," Valentino whispered, his confidence finally cracking. "Nothing should be able to adapt that fast." "He's not from our hell," Carmilla's voice came through Vox's communication system. She had been watching from her estate, monitoring the battle. "Whatever dimension he came from produced something beyond our understanding of demons. You need to retreat, Valentino, now." "Never," Valentino snarled. "I'm not backing down from some interdimensional freak. All forces converge on the Demon King, F. ORGT the hotel, take HIM DOWN. It was the worst order he could have given. The remaining 300 demons abandoned their attack on the hotel, turning all their focus on Muzan. They surrounded him completely, creating a dome of bodies and weapons, pouring everything they had into killing this one target. And Muzan smiled, the first genuine smile since arriving in hell. "Finally," he said softly, "you're all in one place." His body exploded. Not literally, but his flesh erupted outward in an expanding sphere of blade tentacles, each one moving at supersonic speed. The dome of demons didn't have time to scatter, didn't have time to defend. Muzan's attack consumed them all simultaneously, a perfect omnidirectional strike that turned overwhelming numbers into a liability. When the carnage ended, when the blood and body parts stopped falling, Muzan stood alone in a crater of his own making. 250 demons lay dead or dying around him. The remaining 50 had broken and run, fleeing into Pentagram City's streets. Valentino stared at the massacre, his face pale. What are you?" Muzan turned his gaze to the Overlord, his crimson eyes burning with ancient power. Blood covered him, none of it his own. He looked like a demon from humanity's oldest nightmares, the thing that waited in the darkness, the predator that couldn't be escaped. "I am Muzan Kibutsuji," he said, his voice carrying across the battlefield with perfect clarity. "I am the Demon King, the first of my kind, the creature who survived 1,000 years of humanity's best efforts to kill me. And you," he began walking toward Valentino with slow, deliberate steps. "You thought you could defeat me with numbers and stolen angel weapons." Valentino raised his pistol, but his hand shook. "Stay back, I'm an overlord, I have contracts with thousands of souls, I control entire territories." "You are prey," Muzan replied simply, "and I am the predator, that's all you've ever been, all you'll ever be." Before Muzan could reach him, something unexpected happened. The sky above the battlefield tore open, not the red twilight of hell, but true golden light that made every demon present flinch in pain. From the tier descended a figure with wings of pure white, armor that gleamed like the sun, and a face of terrible beauty. An angel, a real angel, not a fallen one, but a divine warrior from heaven itself. "Enough," The angel's voice resonated with power that made hell's reality ripple. Everyone froze, Muzan, Valentino, the hotel's defenders, everyone. The angel floated down to stand between Muzan and Valentino, her gaze sweeping the carnage. "I am Serafina," the angel announced, sent by the Heavenly Council to investigate irregularities in hell's structure, her eyes fixed on Muzan. You are the irregularity, a living soul in the realm of the dead, an impossibility that threatens the cosmic order." Muzan stared at the angel, his mind racing. This was new. This was something he hadn't encountered in his previous life, genuine divine power, the kind that enforced universal laws. "I didn't choose to come here," he said carefully. "No," Serafina agreed. "You fell through a tier in reality, displaced by forces beyond your understanding. But your presence here is creating ripples, Muzan Kibutsuji. Ripples that could tear apart the carefully maintained balance between heaven, hell, and the mortal realm." "Then send me back," Muzan replied. "I have no desire to remain in your cosmic prison." "It's not that simple," Serafina's expression was grave. "The tier that brought you here has closed. The rules that govern dimensional travel are absolute. Once a soul enters hell, it cannot leave except through redemption to heaven. But you're not dead, which means those rules don't apply to you. You're trapped between states." Charlie pushed forward from the hotel, ignoring Vaggy's protests. "Wait, you said souls can leave through redemption. Can't that apply to Muzan? Can't he earn his way out?" Serafina turned her divine gaze to the princess. "Charlotte Morningstar, your father's daughter, still clinging to the impossible dream of rehabilitating sinners." The angel's tone wasn't mocking, but neither was it kind. "Do you truly believe this creature, this demon king who has killed thousands, can be redeemed?" "I believe everyone deserves a chance," Charlie replied firmly. "Even him, especially him." Muzan felt something twist in his chest at her words. This impossible princess, defending him to an angel, believing in his potential for change even after watching him slaughter an army. Serafina studied them both for a long moment, then unexpectedly she smiled, cold and calculating. "Very well, I will present the Heavenly Council with a proposal. Muzan Kibutsuji will be given a trial period. 1 year to prove that redemption is possible for even the most damned souls. If he succeeds, if he can demonstrate genuine change and earn passage to heaven, then the cosmic irregularity will be resolved." "And if I fail?" Muzan asked. "Then you will be permanently bound to hell, stripped of your power and imprisoned in its deepest level for eternity." Serafina's eyes glowed with divine authority. "Those are the terms. Accept them, or I will personally ensure your imprisonment begins immediately." The battlefield was silent. Valentino had slunk away during the conversation, abandoning his remaining forces. The hotel's defenders watched from their positions. Everyone understood the weight of what was being decided. Muzan looked at Charlie, this princess who had somehow made him question a millennium of absolute certainty. "Your redemption program, you truly believe it can work?" "I believe in you," Charlie replied simply. "I believe you can choose to be more than what you were." Muzan turned back to Serafina. "I accept your terms. 1 year to prove redemption is possible." The angel nodded, then let it be witnessed by heaven, hell, and all powers between. Muzan Kibutsuji, the demon king, will walk the path of redemption. Should he succeed, the impossible becomes reality. Should he fail, she spread her wings, preparing to depart. Then we will all learn the true meaning of eternal damnation. Serafina ascended back through the tier in reality, which sealed behind her with a sound like the universe itself closing a book. The golden light faded, leaving only hell's familiar red twilight. Muzan stood in the center of the battlefield, covered in blood, surrounded by corpses, with an angel's ultimatum hanging over his head. 1 year to achieve what he had never attempted in a millennium, to change his fundamental nature, to prove that a monster could become something else. Charlie approached him slowly, stepping over the carnage without flinching. When she reached him, she took his blood-covered hand in hers. "We'll do this together," she said. 1 year is plenty of time, you'll see." Muzan looked down at their joined hands, his stained with death, hers unmarked by hell's corruption. "You're insane," he said quietly. "You know that, genuinely, impossibly insane." "Probably," Charlie agreed with a small smile, "but so is believing that demons can be redeemed, so is running a hotel in hell, so is befriending an interdimensional demon king." Her smile widened. Insanity seems to be working out pretty well so far. Despite everything, the battle, the angel, the impossible challenge ahead, Muzan felt that strange sensation again, that uncomfortable warmth in his chest that he couldn't quite name. Maybe Charlie was right, maybe insanity was exactly what hell needed, maybe what he needed. As they walked back to the hotel together, the surviving demons watching in silence, Muzan Kibutsuji understood that his real journey had only just begun. Surviving for 1,000 years had been simple compared to what lay ahead. Now he had to learn how to truly live, how to change, how to become something more than the perfect predator he had spent a millennium crafting. He had 1 year to prove that redemption wasn't just Charlie's impossible dream. It was his only hope of escape. The aftermath of the battle transformed Pentagram City's power structure overnight. News of the massacre spread through hell like wildfire. 500 demons sent to destroy the Hazbin Hotel, and less than 50 returned. Valentino, one of hell's most feared overlords, had been humiliated and forced to retreat, and an angel, an actual angel from heaven, had descended to make a declaration that shook the foundations of hell's cosmic order. Muzan Kibutsuji, the perfect daimon, was a tempting redemption. In the days following Serafina's ultimatum, the hotel received an unprecedented number of visitors. Some came seeking sanctuary, emboldened by the knowledge that even the overlords couldn't touch them here. Others came to witness the impossible, a creature attempting to defy its own nature. But not all visitors came with peaceful intentions. 1 week after the battle, Lucifer Morningstar himself arrived at the hotel. The King of Hell appeared without fanfare or announcement, simply materializing in the lobby during breakfast. He was shorter than Muzan expected, with blonde hair and an almost cherubic face that belied the cosmic power radiating from his form. This was the fallen angel, the original rebel, the being who had literally shaped hell's existence. Charlie dropped her plate when she saw him. "Dad." "Hey, Charlie Bear," Lucifer said with an awkward smile. "Heard you've been making some waves. Figured I should probably check in, see what all the fuss is about." His eyes shifted to Muzan, and the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "And meet your new friend." Muzan stood slowly, recognizing the threat assessment taking place. Lucifer might appear cheerful and non-threatening, but the power contained within that small frame was beyond anything Muzan had encountered in either dimension. This was a G who had fought in heaven's war, who had created hell itself, who stood at the same cosmic level as God. "Father," Charlie said nervously, "this is Muzan. Well, it's complicated." "I bet it is," Lucifer replied, circling Muzan like a predator studying prey. "A living demon in hell, an interdimensional refugee, a creature with enough power to massacre overlord armies but choosing to pursue redemption instead." He stopped directly in front of Muzan, looking up at the taller demon with eyes that had witnessed the birth of creation. "You're an anomaly, Muzan Kibutsuji, and I don't like anomalies. They tend to break things." "Then we have something in common," Muzan replied carefully. "I also dislike things that disrupt established order, but I didn't choose to come here. Fate, or something like it, made that choice for me." "Fate," Lucifer repeated, tasting the word. "You know what I've learned in my thousands of years running this place? Fate doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't accidentally drop living demons into hell. When something impossible happens, there's always a reason, even if we can't see it yet." He turned to Charlie, his expression softening. "Sweetie, I admire what you're trying to do here, I really do, but this," he gestured to Muzan, "this is playing with forces you don't understand. Heaven is watching now. They sent Serafina to deliver an ultimatum. Do you know what that means?" "It means we have a chance," Charlie replied firmly. "A real chance to prove redemption works. If Muzan can change, if he can earn his way to heaven, then we've validated everything the hotel stands for." "Or," Lucifer countered, "you've given heaven an excuse to intervene directly in hell's affairs for the first time in millennia. You've upset a balance that's been carefully maintained since the beginning of time." Muzan absorbed this information, his perfect mind processing the implications. "You're saying heaven wants me to fail, that my redemption attempt threatens their cosmic order." "I'm saying heaven operates on rules older than existence itself," Lucifer replied. "And one of those rules is that certain beings, certain types of evil can't be redeemed. They're too far gone, too fundamentally corrupt. If you somehow manage to prove that rule wrong." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Then the whole system comes into question, Muzan finished. If I can be redeemed, then anyone can, even the most damned souls, even, he looked at Lucifer meaningfully, even fallen angels. The king of hell smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now you're starting to understand. This isn't just about you anymore, Muzan. Your redemption attempt has become a test case for the entire cosmic order. Heaven will be watching, hell will be watching, and forces far older than both will be taking interest. Let them watch, Charlie interjected. We're not doing anything wrong. We're just trying to help someone change to become better. Why should that threaten anyone? Because, my dear daughter, Lucifer said gently, the current system works. Souls sin, they're punished, they serve their time, and eventually they either accept their damnation or, well, they stay damned. It's not pretty, it's not fair, but it's stable. What you're proposing, redemption for anyone, even monsters, that's chaos, that's revolution. Good, Muzan said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Revolution is good. Systems that rely on eternal suffering don't deserve stability. They deserve to be torn down and rebuilt. Lucifer studied him with new interest. You sound like someone who's toppled kingdoms before. I built one, Muzan replied. An empire that lasted 1,000 years, maintained through fear and absolute power. And in the end, it crumbled because I forgot the most important rule of any kingdom. That strength without purpose is just violence. That control without meaning is just cruelty. He met Lucifer's ancient gaze directly. Your daughter understands something I'm only beginning to grasp. That real power doesn't come from dominance or fear. It comes from giving people something worth believing in, worth fighting for, worth changing for. Pretty words from a creature who killed thousands, Lucifer observed. Yes, Muzan agreed without shame. I am what I am, but I'm also choosing to become something more, not because an angel commanded it, not because I fear damnation, but because, he looked at Charlie, at this impossible princess who believed in the impossible, because someone showed me that change might actually be possible. Lucifer was silent for a long moment, his cosmic mind weighing possibilities and consequences. Finally he sighed, Charlie, you've really done it this time. You've made this weird, creepy demon king care about something other than his own survival. I'm not sure if that's beautiful or terrifying. Can it be both? Charlie asked hopefully. With you it usually is, Lucifer replied with Jen. You in affection, he turned back to Muzan. All right, interdimensional refugee. You want to attempt the impossible, fine, but understand this, I will be watching. And if you hurt my daughter, if you betray her trust, if you use her dream for your own ends, there's no dimension you can flee to, no power you can summon that will protect you from me. Are we clear? Muzan had faced the strongest warriors of his world without fear. He had stared down death itself without flinching. But looking into Lucifer Morningstar's eyes, seeing the absolute certainty of cosmic retribution there, he felt something he rarely experienced. Respect. Crystal clear, he replied. Your daughter's faith in me is not something I take lightly. I will honor it, or I will cease to exist trying. Lucifer nodded, apparently satisfied. Good, then I'll leave you to your redemption attempt. Charlie, call me if you need anything, and try not to start any more interdimensional incidents, okay? He vanished as suddenly as he'd appeared, leaving only a faint scent of brimstone and divine power. Charlie let out a breath she'd been holding. Well, that could have gone worse. Your father is terrifying, Muzan stated flatly. Yeah, but in a loving way, Charlie replied with forced cheerfulness. He's just protective. He'll come around once he sees how much progress you're making. Over the following weeks, Muzan's redemption training intensified. Charlie developed a comprehensive program specifically for him, focusing on the aspects of humanity he'd lost during his transformation. Empathy exercises, trust building, understanding consequences beyond tactical outcomes. It was excruciating. One particularly frustrating session involved Muzan having to listen to demons share their stories, not to analyze them for weaknesses, but to genuinely feel their pain. One demon spoke of being murdered by her husband, arriving in hell, and being trapped in contracts that forced her to relive her trauma nightly. Another described a life of addiction that destroyed his family, guilt that followed him beyond death. Muzan sat through hours of these stories, and something inside him began to crack. These weren't just resources or pawns or obstacles. They were beings who had suffered, who continued to suffer, who desperately wanted escape from their pain. They were, in fundamental ways, not so different from what he had been, a dying human desperate for any chance at survival, willing to pay any cost to escape death. "You're getting better at this," Charlie observed one evening, finding Muzan on the hotel's roof, staring at hell's unchanging sky. "At listening, at understanding. I can see it in how you interact with the other guests. You're not just protecting them anymore, you're starting to care about them." "I don't know if that's better," Muzan replied honestly. "Caring means vulnerability. It means giving others power to hurt you." "It also means connection," Charlie countered, sitting beside him. "It means not being alone anymore. Isn't that worth the risk?" Muzan thought about his 1,000 years of isolation, about being surrounded by demons who served him out of terror, not loyalty, about standing at the apex of his world with nothing but the cold satisfaction of dominance to keep him company. "Perhaps," he conceded. But their moment of peace was shattered by a commotion below. Demons were gathering in the street, pointing at the sky. Muzan's enhanced senses picked up immediately what was wrong. The red twilight was changing, darkening, as if something was blocking hell's ambient light. And then they appeared. Angels, not just one like Seraphina, but dozens. An entire host descending from tiers in reality, their wings blazing with divine light, their weapons gleaming with holy purpose. At their head flew a warrior angel in golden armor, his face hard and judgmental. When he spoke, his voice carried across all of Pentagram City. "Attention, denizens of hell. I am Michael, archangel and commander of heaven's host. By decree of the Heavenly Council, we have come to address the anomaly known as Muzan Kibutsuji." Muzan stood slowly, his body tensing for battle, but Michael's next words stopped him cold. "Your redemption attempt has been deemed insufficient. The Council has concluded that 1 year is too generous a timeline for a creature of your nature. Therefore, your trial period is being accelerated." The angel's smile was cold. "You have 1 month to prove your redemption is genuine. Fail, and you will be cast into the deepest pit of hell, bound for eternity." "You can't do that," Charlie shouted, flying up to confront the angels. "You gave us a year. That was the agreement." "Agreements can be renegotiated when circumstances change," Michael replied, "and circumstances have changed dramatically. Muzan Kibutsuji's presence in hell has already caused significant disruption to the cosmic order. The overlord hierarchy is destabilizing the balance between heaven and hell is shifting. We cannot allow this to continue for an entire year." "This is because I'm succeeding," Muzan said, understanding dawning, "because Charlie's methods are actually working. You're afraid of what it means if I actually achieve redemption." Michael's expression hardened. "We are afraid of nothing. We are maintaining order. The rules that govern existence cannot be bent simply because one demon learned to fake empathy." "I'm not faking anything," Muzan replied, and was surprised to realize it was true. "I'm changing, actually changing, and you can't allow that because it threatens your perfect system." 1 month, Michael repeated, ignoring his words. "Prove yourself worthy or face eternal torment. Heaven has spoken." The angels vanished as quickly as they'd appeared, leaving only the weight of their ultimatum behind. Charlie turned to Muzan, her face pale. 1 month, that's not enough time. We need at least 6 months to demonstrate real change, to build a case for. "Charlie," Muzan interrupted gently, "it was never about time. Heaven has already decided I can't be redeemed. They're just going through the motions, creating the appearance of fairness before they condemn me." "Then what do we do?" Her voice cracked with desperation. "I can't let them imprison you, not after all the progress you've made, not after." "After I became your friend," Muzan finished. He smiled, and it was genuine, perhaps the first truly warm expression he'd made in a millennium. "I appreciate that, Charlie, more than you know, but we both understand how this ends." "No," Charlie said firmly, "I don't accept that. There has to be a way. We'll work harder, we'll." A new voice interrupted them. "There is a way," Alastor said, appearing from the shadows, "but it's dangerous, potentially catastrophic, and it requires our dear Muzan to do something he's never done before." "What?" Muzan asked. Alastor's smile widened impossibly. "Die." The word hung in the air like a curse. Charlie and Muzan stared at the radio demon, trying to understand what he was suggesting. "Explain," Muzan demanded. "It's simple, really," Alastor replied. "The problem with your redemption attempt is that you're not dead. You're a living demon in a realm of the dead, which means the normal rules don't apply. But if you were to die, truly die, then you become a proper resident of hell. A soul that could be judged, processed, and potentially redeemed through the established channels. You want me to kill myself, Muzan said flatly. I want you to transform, Alastor corrected. To complete your transition into this realm. It's a gamble, certainly. Death might be permanent, or it might be exactly what you need to prove your redemption is genuine. Charlie looked horrified. We are not killing Muzan, that's insane. More insane than expecting heaven to honestly evaluate his redemption in 1 month, Alastor countered. They've rigged the game, my dear. Muzan is right, they've already decided he fails. The only way to win a rigged game is to change the rules. Muzan processed this logic, his perfect mind running through possibilities and probabilities. Alastor was right, heaven had no intention of accepting his redemption. They wanted him to fail so they could maintain their cosmic order, prove that certain beings were irredeemable. But if he died, if he truly became a resident of hell rather than an anomaly. It could work, he said slowly. If I die and become a proper soul, then heaven would have to process my redemption through their established system. They couldn't simply dismiss it as an anomaly. Exactly, Alastor seemed pleased that someone understood his logic. Absolutely not, Charlie grabbed Muzan's arm. We are not doing this, we'll find another way, Charlie, Muzan turned to face her, his crimson eyes soft with something that might have been affection. You've taught me something important these past months. You've shown me that change is possible, that even a monster can learn to care about something beyond survival. But you've also taught me something else, that real change requires sacrifice, that redemption isn't free. Tears formed in Charlie's eyes. Not this, please, there has to be another way. Perhaps there is, Muzan agreed, but we have 1 month to find it, and if we fail, if heaven condemns me to eternal imprisonment, then I'll have no chance at all. At least Alastor's plan offers hope. He looked out over Pentagram City, at the demons who had come to the hotel seeking sanctuary, at the impossible dream Charlie had built in Hell's heart. I spent 1,000 years surviving, he said quietly. Maybe it's time I learned how to actually live, even if it means dying first. In the days that followed, as the clock counted down toward heaven's deadline, as the overlords watched with predatory interest, as forces beyond hell and heaven began to take notice of the cosmic drama unfolding. Muzan Kibutsuji Adele his decision. He would die, he would transform from living demon to proper soul. He would gamble everything on Charlie's impossible dream of redemption. Because after a millennium of perfect survival, he had finally found something worth dying for. And that realization, more than any empathy exercise or trust-building activity, proved that perhaps redemption wasn't quite so impossible after all. The decision to die is far easier than the preparation for it. Muzan Kibutsuji stood in the hotel's library, surrounded by ancient texts about hell's nature, death's mechanics, and the transformation of living beings into proper souls. Alastor had procured these books from sources he refused to name, each tome bound in materials that predated modern hell itself. You understand this is irreversible, Alastor said, sitting across from him with his eternal smile. Once you cross that threshold, there's no coming back as what you were. You'll be a soul, subject to all of hell's rules and limitations. I spent 1,000 years being unkillable, Muzan replied, not looking up from his reading. Perhaps mortality will be refreshing. Or permanent, Alastor countered. Death in hell is peculiar. For demons born here, it means dissolution, erasure from existence. For sinners, it means potential reformation into something else. But for a living creature dying in hell, that's unprecedented territory. Muzan finally looked up, his crimson eyes meeting Alastor's knowing gaze. You believe this will fail, that I'll simply cease to exist. I believe, Alastor said carefully, that you're gambling with forces even I don't fully understand, and I find that absolutely fascinating. His smile widened, also somewhat admirable. The great demon king choosing oblivion over imprisonment, there's a poetry to it. I'm not choosing oblivion, Muzan corrected. I'm choosing transformation, there's a difference. Over the following week, the hotel became a hub of frantic preparation. Charlie threw herself into research, determined to find some way to guarantee Muzan's survival through the process. Vaggie worked with Carmilla Carmine, who had surprisingly offered assistance to understand the metaphysical mechanics involved. Even Angel Dust and Husk contributed, gathering information from Hell's underworld about similar cases, though none matched Muzan's unique situation. But the most significant help came from an unexpected source. 3 days before the deadline, Lucifer returned to the hotel. This time his demeanor was different, less confrontational, more contemplative. He found Muzan alone in the rooftop garden Charlie had created, a small oasis of impossible greenery in Hell's wasteland. "So you're really going through with this," Lucifer said, materializing beside him. "Death by choice, that's not something I expected from someone like you." "Someone like me?" Muzan asked. "A survivor, someone who spent a millennium refusing to die." Lucifer sat on the garden's edge, looking far too casual for the king of hell. "I understand that impulse, survival above all else. It's what made me rebel in the first place, refusing to accept God's plan, choosing my own path no matter the cost." "And how did that work out for you?" Muzan asked, not unkindly. Lucifer laughed, but there was darkness in it. "I got everything I wanted and nothing I needed. Power, freedom, an entire realm to rule, and 10,000 years of regret." He looked at Muzan directly. "Charlie thinks you're changing, actually becoming better, is she right?" Muzan considered the question seriously. "I don't know if better is the right word, different certainly. I've learned to feel things I thought I'd lost, empathy, connection, something that might be remorse for the suffering I've caused." He paused. "Whether that makes me better or just more conflicted, I can't say." "That's more self-awareness than most demons achieve in eternity," Lucifer observed. "Heaven says you're faking it, that creatures like us can't really change, we just get better at pretending." He turned to face Muzan fully. "Prove them wrong, not for heaven, not even for Charlie, for yourself. Show that choice matters, that what we become isn't predetermined by what we were." "Is that why you're helping?" Muzan asked. "To prove something to yourself?" "Maybe," Lucifer admitted. "Or maybe I just want to see if my daughter's impossible dream can actually work. If you can be redeemed, then maybe." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Maybe anyone could. The night before Muzan's planned death, Charlie organized what she called a celebration of life. Though given they were in hell and the subject was choosing death, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The hotel's residents gathered in the main hall, sharing stories and memories of their time with Muzan. Angel Dust went first, surprisingly sincere. "When you first got here, I thought you were just another scary demon, and you're terrifying, but you also protected us, made us feel like we mattered, like this place was actually worth defending." Husk added his own rough gratitude. "You didn't have to fight for us, could have let the overlords burn this place down and walked away, but you didn't, that means something." Nifty bounced up, her single eye bright. "You're always so clean, even covered in blood, you never get messy, I appreciate that." Even Vaggie, who had been skeptical of Muzan from the beginning, offered grudging respect. "You've proven me wrong. I thought you were using Charlie, using the hotel for your own ends, but you're actually trying. That takes guts, especially for someone about to, Finally, Charlie stood. She had been quiet most of the evening, her usual enthusiasm dampened by the weight of what was coming. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "I don't want to lose you," she said simply. "You've become important to me, to the hotel, to everyone here. You've shown that change is possible, that even the most damaged souls can choose to be different." Tears ran down her face. "I just wish proving that didn't require this." Muzan stood, crossing the room to stand before her. For a moment, he simply looked at her, this impossible princess who had somehow cracked the armor he'd spent a millennium building. "Charlie," he said quietly, "you gave me something I never thought I'd have again. Hope, purpose, a reason to be more than just a survivor." He placed a hand on her shoulder, the gesture awkward but genuine. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whether I succeed or fail, know that these months with you have mattered. You've shown me what it means to actually live, not just exist." Charlie threw her arms around him, sobbing. Muzan stood rigid for a moment. Physical affection was still foreign to him, then slowly, carefully returned the embrace. Around them, the hotel's residents watched in silence. This creature, this demon king who had killed thousands, was choosing death to prove he could change. It was the most profound act of faith any of them had witnessed. The next morning arrived with hell's typical red twilight. In the hotel's courtyard, preparations were complete. Alastor had drawn elaborate sigils across the ground, ancient symbols that would theoretically facilitate Muzan's transformation from living demon to proper soul. Lucifer stood as witness, his presence lending cosmic weight to the proceedings, and angels, led by Seraphina, had descended to observe, ensuring the process was legitimate. "Are you ready?" Charlie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Muzan stood in the center of the sigils, looking remarkably calm for someone about to die, as ready as one can be for the unknown. "The process is simple," Alastor explained, his radiostatic voice somehow solemn. "You'll use your own power to stop your heart, to end the biological processes that keep you alive. The sigils will capture your essence, preventing it from dissipating, and reshape it into a proper soul, theoretically." "Theoretically," Muzan repeated with dark humor. "How reassuring." Seraphina stepped forward, her divine presence making several demons flinch. "Before you proceed, Muzan Kibutsuji, know that heaven is watching. If you survive this transformation, if you become a proper soul, your redemption trial will continue under standard procedures. 1 year as originally promised, but if you fail, if this is merely a trick to escape judgment." "I understand the stakes," Muzan interrupted. "I've always understood them." He closed his eyes, centering himself. This was it, the moment where 1,000 years of survival instinct would have to be overcome. Every fiber of his being screamed against what he was about to do. Death was the enemy. Death was what he had spent his entire existence fleeing from. But death was also the only path forward. Muzan reached deep within himself to the core of his demonic power. The flesh manipulation, the cellular control that had made him immortal, he turned it inward. His heart, which had beaten for over a millennium, began to slow. Charlie grabbed Vagi's hand, unable to watch but unable to look away. Muzan's heartbeat slowed further, his breathing stopped. His body, which had survived sunlight's near destruction and countless battles, began to shut down through pure will. And then something unexpected happened. As Muzan's physical form died, as his essence began to separate from his body, the courtyard filled with visions. Not illusions, but memories, Muzan's memories, bleeding out into reality as his consciousness fractured. Everyone present saw them, saw a young man, pale and dying, desperate for life, saw his transformation into the first demon, the horror and ecstasy of becoming something beyond human. Saw 1,000 years of loneliness, of standing apart from all existence, of being so perfect that nothing could touch him, not love, not connection, not anything that made life worth living. They saw his arrival in hell, saw Charlie's kindness, saw his slow, painful realization that he had wasted a millennium on survival without purpose. The memories were brutal in their honesty. Muzan wasn't hiding anything, wasn't presenting himself as redeemed or transformed. He was showing exactly what he was, a monster trying to become something else, failing and trying again, choosing to risk everything for the chance to change. Charlie wept openly. Several demons looked away, unable to bear the raw vulnerability of it. And then at the moment of death, something else appeared in the visions. A figure, shrouded in darkness, ancient beyond measure. It spoke in a voice that seemed to come from the foundation of hell itself. "You dare," it said, "you dare to defy the order, to transcend the limitations placed upon you." Lucifer's expression shifted to alarm. Oh no, not him, anyone but him. The figure materialized in the courtyard, a demon of such ancient power that even the angels recoiled. He was tall, draped in robes that seemed to absorb light, with eyes that held the weight of eons. "I am Samael," the figure announced, "the first sin, the original corruption, the darkness that existed before hell itself was created." His gaze fixed on Muzan's transforming essence. "And I will not allow this." "You have no authority here," Seraphina declared, her wings blazing with holy light. "This is a sanctioned redemption trial." "Redemption is a lie," Samael replied calmly. "A story heaven tells to give the damned false hope, but I know the truth. Some beings cannot change. We are what we are eternally, and this creature," he gestured to Muzan's dying form, "this demon king understands that truth better than anyone." The ancient demon raised his hand, and reality itself seemed to bend. The sigils Alastor had drawn began to crack, their power disrupted by something far older than any magic in Hell's arsenal. "No," Charlie screamed, rushing forward, but Vagi pulled her back as Samael's power rippled outward. I offer you a choice, Muzan Kibutsuji, Samuel said, his voice resonating through dimensions. Stop this foolish attempt at transformation. Return to life, accept what you are, and I will grant you something no being in hell has ever possessed, true freedom. Freedom from heaven's judgment, from hell's rules, from the cosmic order itself. Muzan's consciousness, suspended between life and death, processed these words. True freedom, everything he had ever wanted. No more limitations, no more weakness, no more pretending to be something he wasn't. All he had to do was give up on redemption. And if I refuse, Muzan's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, his essence still transforming. Then I will ensure your death is permanent, Samuel replied without emotion. You will not become a soul, you will not get your trial, you will simply cease, erased from existence as if you never were. Do it, Charlie shouted desperately. Take his offer. I don't care about the trial, I don't care about redemption, I just don't want you to die. But Muzan's response came clear and certain. No. Samuel's expression shifted to genuine surprise. You choose oblivion over freedom. I choose hope over certainty, Muzan replied, his voice growing stronger even as his essence continued to fracture. I choose the possibility of change over the guarantee of stagnation. You say some beings cannot change, cannot be more than what they are, but Charlie taught me something, that the choice to try matters even if we fail, especially if we fail. His essence began to coalesce, the transformation continuing despite Samuel's interference. I spent 1,000 years as the perfect predator, Samuel, and it was empty, meaningless. If death is the price for the chance to become something more, then it's a price I'll pay. Fool, Samuel hissed, his ancient power surging. Then die and be forgotten. He unleashed his full force, reality-bending power designed to erase Muzan completely. But before it could strike, 3 things happened simultaneously. Charlie, driven by desperate love for someone who had become her friend, threw herself forward, her demonic power, inherited from Lucifer himself, forming a shield. Lucifer, seeing his daughter in danger, manifested his full divine authority, the power of a fallen angel who had once stood beside God himself. And Alastor, for reasons known only to himself, channeled every ounce of his considerable power into maintaining the transformation sigils. The 3 forces collided with Samuel's ancient corruption, creating an explosion of cosmic energy that shattered windows across Pentagram City. Reality itself cracked, showing glimpses of other dimensions, other worlds. And in the center of it all, Muzan Kibutsuji died. His living body collapsed empty, his essence, freed from physical form, hung suspended in the chaos, and then slowly, impossibly, it began to reform. Not as a living demon, not as the Creator. He had been, but as something new, a proper soul, bound to hell's rules but also protected by them. A demon who had died and been reborn, who had chosen transformation over preservation. When the cosmic storm cleared, when reality stitched itself back together, Muzan Kibutsuji stood in the courtyard once more. He looked the same, pale skin, crimson eyes, perfect features, but something fundamental had changed. Where once there had been an aura of ancient malice, now there was possibility. He was no longer an anomaly, no longer a living demon trapped in the realm of the dead. He was simply a soul, one with a chance at redemption. Samuel stared at him, something like respect in his ancient eyes. You actually did it, you chose death over power. He turned to leave, his robes flowing like liquid shadow. Perhaps I was wrong, perhaps some beings can change after all. The ancient demon vanished, leaving only the stunned witnesses to what had occurred. Serafina stepped forward, her divine presence somehow less overwhelming than before. Muzan Kibutsuji, you have successfully transformed into a proper resident of hell. Your redemption trial will continue under standard procedures, 1 year to demonstrate genuine change and earn passage to heaven. She looked at him with something that might have been respect. I did not believe this would work. I did not believe you would actually go through with it. Perhaps there is more to redemption than heaven understood. The angels departed, leaving the hotel's residents alone with their resurrected friend. Charlie rushed forward, tackling Muzan in a hug that would have knocked over a normal demon. You're okay, you're actually okay. I thought, when Samuel attacked, I thought we'd lost you. Muzan stood still, processing the new sensations flooding through him. Death had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. He felt lighter, less burdened by the weight of 1,000 years of accumulated cruelty. "I am different," he said slowly. "I can feel it. The transformation worked, but it altered something fundamental. I'm not what I was." "Is that bad?" Charlie asked, pulling back to look at him. Muzan considered the question. He reached inward, examining his power. It was still there, the flesh manipulation, the cellular control, the abilities that had made him the Demon King. But they felt different now, filtered through his new existence as a soul rather than a living being. "No," he finally answered, "it's not bad, it's just new." Lucifer approached, studying Muzan with his cosmic senses. "You've become something unprecedented, a demon who died by choice and reformed as a soul. That's never happened before, literally never in all of existence." "What does that mean?" Vaggie asked. "It means," Alastor interjected cheerfully, "that our dear Muzan has created a loophole in the cosmic order. He's proven that transformation is possible, that choice can override nature. That's rather revolutionary." "Revolutionary," Lucifer agreed grimly, "which means heaven won't be happy. Samael wasn't just some random ancient demon. He was testing Muzan on behalf of forces far older than hell itself, and Muzan passed." He looked at Charlie. "Your hotel just became the focal point of something much bigger than redemption, sweetie. You've proven that the impossible is possible, and that's going to have consequences none of us can predict." But Charlie wasn't thinking about cosmic consequences. She was looking at Muzan, at her friend who had literally died and been reborn for the chance to change, and she was smiling through her tears. "We did it," she said. "You did it. You're really going to get your redemption trial now, a full year under fair conditions." "Yes," Muzan agreed, his crimson eyes meeting hers with newfound clarity. "A full year to prove that monsters can become something better, to show that choice matters more than nature." He looked around the courtyard at the demons who had witnessed his transformation, at the hotel that had become his home, at the princess who had taught him that change was possible. "Let's not waste it," he said. And somewhere in the spaces between dimensions, in the cosmic machinery that governed existence itself, forces that had slumbered for eons began to wake. Because Muzan Kibutsuji had done the impossible, and the impossible, once accomplished, had a way of spreading. The war for Hell's soul had only just begun. The weeks following Muzan's transformation were unlike anything Hell had experienced in its eternal history. News of his death and rebirth spread across all of Pentagram City, then beyond, into the other rings of Hell, into the darkest corners where even overlords feared to tread. A demon had chosen death to prove he could change. A creature of absolute evil had gambled everything on the possibility of redemption. And he had survived. The hotel's population exploded. Demons arrived in numbers that strained. Even Charlie's boundless optimism, hundreds then thousands, all seeking what Muzan had found, a chance, a possibility, a way to become something other than what Hell had made them. But not everyone celebrated this revolution. In the highest towers of heaven, the Heavenly Council convened for the first time in 3,000 years. 7 archangels, each embodying fundamental aspects of divine will, gathered around a table of pure light to discuss the Muzan problem. "He should not exist," declared Gabriel, his voice resonating with absolute certainty. "A demon who died and reformed as a soul. This violates the fundamental order." "And yet it happened," Michael countered, his warrior's mind already analyzing the implications. "Which means either our understanding of the cosmic order is incomplete, or the order itself is changing." "Changing is impossible," another archangel stated. "The rules were established at creation, they are immutable." "Then explain Muzan Kibutsuji," Michael challenged. "Explain how a living demon entered Hell, died by choice, and reformed as something new. Explain how his transformation created ripples we can feel across dimensions." The council was silent, struggling with a problem that shouldn't exist. Finally, the eldest archangel spoke, Metatron, the voice of God himself. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "this is not a violation of order. Perhaps this is order evolving. Creation is not static. Even the divine can grow, can adapt. The question is not whether Muzan's transformation was possible, but what it means for everything else." "You're suggesting we accept this?" Gabriel's voice was sharp with disbelief. I'm suggesting we watch, Metatron replied. If Muzan Kibutsuji can truly achieve redemption, if he can prove that even the most damned can change, then perhaps redemption means more than we understood. Perhaps hell itself means more. Or perhaps, Michael said darkly, this is the beginning of something far more dangerous, a challenge to divine authority itself. Down in hell, Muzan was discovering the practical challenges of his new existence. Being a proper soul came with limitations he hadn't anticipated. His power, while still formidable, was bound by hell's rules now. He couldn't leave the Pride Ring without permission. He was vulnerable to angelic weapons in ways he hadn't been as a living demon, and most significantly, he could now be killed permanently. Mortality is inconvenient, he observed to Alastor during a training session. I spent a millennium avoiding it. Now I've willingly embraced it. Ah, but mortality comes with advantages, Alastor replied, demonstrating a spell that Muzan's living form could never have performed. You're part of Hell's system now. That means you can access its power structures, make contracts, operate within the framework that controls everything here. I have no interest in soul contracts, Muzan said firmly. That's slavery with extra steps. Not all contracts are slavery, Alastor corrected, his smile knowing. Some are partnerships, some are investments. The system isn't inherently evil, it's how you use it that matters. But Muzan's attention was pulled away by a commotion outside. Through the window, he could see demons gathering in unusual numbers, their faces turned toward the sky with expressions of fear and awe. The red twilight was changing, not darkening like when angels descended, but brightening, as if something was trying to break through from above. That's not good, Alastor said, his jovial tone faltering for the first time Muzan had witnessed. Charlie burst into the room, Vaggie close behind. We have a problem, a big one. Heaven just announced that they're sending an inspection team to evaluate your progress, not in a year, tomorrow. Tomorrow, Muzan's eyes narrowed. The trial was supposed to last a year, it's been less than 2 months. They're calling it a preliminary assessment, Vaggie said, her frustration evident. Basically, they're looking for any excuse to declare the trial invalid and imprison you immediately. Let them try, Muzan replied coldly. I've faced their angels before, I'm not afraid of their judgment. You should be, a new voice interjected. Lucifer materialized in the room, his usually casual demeanor replaced by genuine concern. The inspection team isn't just angels, it's being led by Metatron himself, the voice of God. If he declares your redemption invalid, there's no appeal, no second chance. You go straight to hell's deepest pit. The weight of that statement settled over everyone. Metatron was beyond even the archangels in authority. His word was, quite literally, divine law. Then I'll have to convince him my redemption is genuine, Muzan said with more confidence than he felt. How? Charlie asked desperately. What can we possibly show him that will prove you've changed? You've been good, you've helped people, you've learned empathy, but how do you quantify that? How do you prove? E-transformation to someone who doesn't believe it's possible. Muzan was silent, his perfect mind racing through possibilities. Charlie was right, his changes were internal, subjective. How did you prove to a cosmic judge that your soul had genuinely transformed? The answer came from an unexpected source. Husk, who had been listening from the doorway, spoke up. Show him the opposite. Show him what you would have been if you hadn't changed. Everyone turned to look at the cat demon. Think about it, Husk continued, stepping into the room. When you first got here, you were a killing machine, pure predator. You slaughtered Valentino's army without hesitation. But since your transformation, you've been defending instead of attacking, protecting instead of destroying. That's the proof, not what you've become, but what you've chosen not to be. Muzan considered this. It was true. Since his rebirth as a soul, he had been different, more controlled, more thoughtful, less willing to solve problems through overwhelming violence. The old me would have hunted down Valentino and killed him for the insult, Muzan said slowly. Would have eliminated every overlord who posed a threat, would have conquered hell through sheer dominance. Exactly, Husk agreed. You had the power to become hell's new king, but you didn't. You chose to stay here to work on redemption, to actually try changing. That's the proof. Charlie's face lit up with hope. That's brilliant. We can document everything, all the times you chose mercy over violence, all the demons you've helped, all the progress you've made. But Lucifer shook his head grimly. Metatron won't care about documentation. He'll look into Muzan's soul directly, read his essential nature. If there's any darkness there, any hint that this is manipulation rather than genuine change, he'll see it. Then we have a problem, Vaggie said flatly, because Muzan's still got plenty of darkness. He's not a saint. He's a reforming demon king who's trying, not someone who's magically become pure. Maybe that's okay, Charlie said quietly. Everyone looked at her. Maybe redemption isn't about becoming perfect. Maybe it's about choosing to be better, even when you're still flawed, even when you still have darkness inside you. She approached Muzan, taking his hands in hers. You're not going to convince Metatron that you're a completely changed being. You're going to show him that you're a being actively choosing to change. That's the real test, not perfection, but commitment to growth. Muzan looked down at their joined hands, still somewhat uncomfortable with physical affection, but no longer recoiling from it. And if he decides that's not enough. Then we fight, Charlie said with unexpected steel in her voice. Not with violence, but with truth. We show heaven that their system is wrong, that redemption is real, that even you deserve a chance. The next day arrived with apocalyptic weight. The sky above Pentagram City split open, and from the tier descended a light so pure, so absolute, that even the hotel's defenses struggled to withstand it. Metatron emerged from the light, and he was unlike any angel Muzan had encountered. There were no wings, no obvious weapons, no theatrical displays of power. He appeared as a simple man in simple robes, with eyes that had witnessed the birth of existence itself. But the power radiating from him made the archangels look like children playing with matches. Muzan Kibutsuji, Metatron's voice was soft but inescapable, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I have come to assess your redemption trial, to determine if your transformation is genuine or merely another deception in a millennium of deceptions. The hotel's residents had gathered in the courtyard, demons, sinners, all those who had found sanctuary there. They stood in silent support, a wall of belief behind their unlikely champion. Muzan stepped forward, meeting Metatron's ancient gaze directly. I am ready for your judgment. Are you? Metatron asked, and suddenly they were alone, not physically, but in a space between spaces where only truth could exist. Let me show you something, Demon King. Let me show you what you are. Reality peeled away, and Muzan found himself witnessing his own history, not as he remembered it, but as the universe recorded it. He saw every death he'd caused, every demon he'd created, every family destroyed by his hand. Thousands of lives, thousands of souls, all snuffed out to feed his hunger for perfection. The weight of it was crushing, not because he didn't know, he'd always known, but because for the first time he felt the full impact of what he'd done. The empathy Charlie had taught him turned his past into an unbearable burden. This is what you are, Metatron said, a millennium of suffering given form. How can such a creature be redeemed? I can't erase what I did, Muzan replied, his voice steady despite the crushing guilt. I can't undo the pain, can. Bring back the dead. All I can do is choose to be different going forward, to use my remaining existence to create good rather than suffering. Noble words, Metatron observed, but is that enough? Does choosing to change outweigh 1,000 years of evil? I don't know, Muzan admitted, but isn't that the point of redemption, that we get to try, that change is possible even for the worst of us? Metatron studied him in silence, those cosmic eyes reading every nuance of his transformed soul. You are conflicted. Part of you still clings to what you were, the power, the perfection, the absolute control. You have not fully let go of your old nature. No, Muzan agreed, I haven't, and I may never fully let go. But every day I choose to be less of that creature and more of something new. That's the best I can offer. Is it enough? Metatron asked, and Muzan realized the question was genuine, not rhetorical, but a real inquiry. Even the voice of God was unsure. Before Muzan could answer, the private space shattered. They snapped back to reality to find chaos erupting in the courtyard. Demons were pouring in from the city, but not attackers. These were refugees, fleeing from something that was tearing through Pentagram City with unstoppable force. What's happening? Charlie demanded. One of the refugees, bleeding and terrified, gasped out an answer. Samuel, the ancient demon, he's come back and he's destroying everything. Says if heaven won't enforce the old order, he will. Says no demon should ever be redeemed, that it's an insult to what we are. Muzan's eyes widened. Samael, the ancient corruption who had tried to stop his transformation, was now targeting the entire concept of redemption itself. "He's heading here," another demon reported. "Says he's going to destroy the hotel and everyone in it. Prove that redemption is impossible by eliminating everyone seeking it." Metatron's expression was unreadable. "This complicates matters. An ancient demon attacking during my assessment. How convenient." "Are you suggesting I arranged this?" Muzan asked sharply. "I'm suggesting that the universe itself is taking sides in this debate," Metatron replied. "Samael represents the old order, the belief that demons are irredeemable, that evil is eternal. Your hotel represents the opposite. This conflict was inevitable." In the distance, a roar shook Hell's foundations. Samael was coming, and with him, the final test of whether redemption could survive in a realm built on damnation. Charlie grabbed Muzan's arm. "What do we do? If you fight him, if you kill him, doesn't that prove you haven't really changed? But if you don't fight, everyone here dies." Muzan looked at Metatron, at this cosmic judge who would determine his fate. "What would you have me do? Fight and prove I'm still the monster I was, or stand down and let innocent demons be slaughtered?" Metatron's expression was enigmatic. "That, Muzan Kibutsuji, is exactly the question your redemption trial was designed to answer. Show me, show all of heaven and hell. When faced with an impossible choice, what does the reformed demon king choose?" Samael's dark form appeared on the horizon, growing larger as he approached. His ancient power made the air itself scream, reality warping around his corruption. And Muzan, standing in a courtyard full of demons who believed in redemption, who had risked everything for the chance to change, made his choice. "I fight," he said, "not because I want to, not because violence is my nature anymore, but because these souls deserve protection. Because sometimes redemption requires defending those who seek it." He looked at Metatron directly. "Judge me for that if you must, but I won't let them die to prove a philosophical point." The voice of God studied him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a genuine expression of something that might have been approval. "Go," Metatron said, "face the ancient darkness. Show me what a demon choosing redemption truly looks like." Muzan turned toward the approaching storm, his transformed power rising. This would be different from every other battle he'd fought. Not a slaughter, not a display of dominance, but a defense of something worth preserving. Behind him, Charlie and the hotel's residents prepared their own defenses. Before him, an ancient demon embodying the old order approached with apocalyptic fury. And somewhere between the two forces, in the space where choice mattered more than nature, Muzan Kibutsuji prepared to prove that monsters could, in fact, become something more. The battle for redemption's soul had reached its critical moment. And heaven itself was watching to see what the impossible would teach them. Samael arrived like the end of existence itself. The ancient demon's form was difficult to perceive directly, a writhing mass of primordial darkness that predated Hell's structure, that had existed in the void before creation imposed order. Where he walked, reality. Why decayed? Where his gaze fell, demons dissolved into their component essences. "This ends now," Samael's voice resonated from every direction. "No more pretending, no more games. Demons are eternal evil, and I will prove it by destroying every soul that dares believe otherwise." He raised his hand, and a wave of pure corruption rolled toward the hotel, power sufficient to unmake the building and everyone within it. Muzan met it head-on. His flesh erupted into a massive barrier, absorbing the corruption with his transformed cells. It hurt not physically, but spiritually. Samael's power was antithetical to everything Muzan had become since his death and rebirth. It called to the darkness still within him, tried to reawaken the pure predator he had spent months learning to suppress. "You think you've changed," Samael laughed, a sound like universes dying. "You're still the demon king, still the creature who slaughtered thousands. One pretty speech to an angel doesn't erase what you are." He lashed out with tendrils of ancient malice, each one carrying enough power to kill an overlord. Muzan countered with his own flesh morphs, the two forces colliding in explosions that shattered windows across Pentagram City. Behind Muzan, the hotel's defenders had mobilized. Charlie stood at the front, her demonic power blazing. Vaggie, Angel Dust, Husk, all of them ready to fight alongside him. Even Alastor had manifested his full power, the radio demon's smile somehow grim. "You don't have to do this alone," Charlie shouted over the chaos. "We fight together." "No," Muzan replied, his voice carrying absolute authority. "This is my test, my choice. Keep the refugees safe, protect those who can't fight, but Samuel," he looked at the ancient demon with cold determination, "he's mine." Muzan launched himself at Samuel with speed that tore through hell's reality. The two demons collided with force that sent shockwaves across multiple dimensions. For any observer, it looked like pure violence, two apex predators trying to destroy each other. But Muzan was fighting differently than he ever had before. In his old life, battles were about dominance, about proving his superiority, crushing his opponents, demonstrating that he was the apex of existence. But now, as he matched Samuel's ancient power with his own transformed abilities, Muzan found himself fighting for something else entirely. Protection, defense, the preservation of hope. "You're holding back," Samuel observed, his dark form rippling with surprise. "You have power sufficient to match me, yet you restrain yourself. Why?" "Because," Muzan replied, deflecting another reality-warping attack, "the old me would have turned this entire district into a crater to ensure victory, would have sacrificed every demon nearby if it meant winning, but that's not who I choose to be anymore." He pressed his attack, his flesh morph striking with surgical precision, targeting Samuel without causing collateral damage, protecting the refugees flooding into the hotel even as he battled an ancient demon. "Fool," Samuel snarled, "that weakness will be your death." The ancient demon's power surged, and for a moment it seemed like he would overwhelm Muzan through sheer cosmic weight, but then something unexpected happened. The demons in the hotel, those seeking redemption, those who had witnessed Muzan's transformation, began to manifest their own power, not to fight but to bolster, to believe so strongly in the possibility of change that their collective will become tangible. It wasn't much, individual demons had little power, but hundreds of them, thousands across the city who had heard about the hotel's impossible dream, all focusing their hope on one point. It was enough. Muzan felt it, the weight of their belief flowing into him, not increasing his power but reinforcing his resolve, reminding him why he was fighting, what he was defending. "This is what you don't understand, Samuel," Muzan said, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Power isn't just about strength, it's about purpose, and these demons have given me something you never could, a reason to be more than just a survivor." He channeled everything he had, 1,000 years of accumulated power, refined through his transformation, focused with the precision of a creature who had perfected violence but chosen to wield it in defense rather than conquest. The attack was unlike anything hell had witnessed, not a mindless display of force, but a perfectly calculated strike designed to neutralize Samuel without destroying everything around them. Samuel staggered, genuine shock crossing his ancient features. You actually did it. You found a way to use your monstrous power without being a monster." "I'm still learning," Muzan admitted, breathing hard. The fight was taking its toll. His transformed body wasn't as durable as his living form had been. But that's the point, isn't it? Redemption isn't about perfection, it's about Ois, every day, every moment, choosing to be better than what you were. "Pretty philosophy," Samuel replied, gathering his power for a final assault. "But philosophy doesn't change nature. You're still a demon, Muzan Kibutsuji, and demons belong in darkness." He unleashed everything, the accumulated corruption of eons, power that had existed before hell itself was created. It was too much. Muzan's defenses crumbled under the assault. His transformed body began to break down, unable to withstand corruption of that magnitude. He was losing, going to die permanently this time, his soul dissolved back into hell's essence. And in that moment of certain defeat, Muzan realized something profound. He wasn't afraid. For 1,000 years he had feared death above all else, had transformed himself into a monster to escape it, but now, standing on the precipice of final oblivion, facing destruction to protect others, he felt at peace. This was what Charlie had tried to teach him, that there were things worth dying for, that sacrifice wasn't weakness but the ultimate expression of strength. "Thank you," Muzan said quietly, his words somehow reaching Charlie across the battlefield, "for showing me what it means to live." He closed his eyes, accepting the end. But the end didn't come. Light erupted across the battlefield, not the corrupting darkness of Samael or the defensive power of Muzan, but something else entirely. Pure, golden, absolute. Divine light. Metatron stepped between them and with a single gesture neutralized Samael's attack. The ancient demon's corruption hit the voice of God's power and simply stopped, dispersed, unmade. Enough, Metatron declared, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic law. I have seen sufficient to make my judgment. Samael recoiled, even his ancient power recognizing that Metatron operated on a level beyond him. You're interfering, taking his side. I am enforcing divine will, Metatron replied calmly, and divine will has determined that Muzan Kibutsuji's redemption attempt is genuine. He turned to look at Muzan, who was still standing despite his devastating injuries. You were willing to die protecting others, to sacrifice yourself not for survival, not for power, but because you believed these souls deserved protection. That is the essence of redemption, not the absence of darkness, but the choice to stand against it. He raised his hand and Muzan's wounds began to heal, but it wasn't just physical restoration, something deeper was happening. The transformation Muzan had undergone when he died was completing itself, evolving into something new. I hereby declare your redemption trial successful, Metatron announced. Muzan Kibutsuji, you have proven that change is possible, that even the most damned can choose to become something better. Silence fell across the battlefield. The impossible had occurred. A demon king, had been officially recognized by heaven itself as genuinely reformed. Charlie was sobbing with joy, held up by Vaggie, who looked equally stunned. The hotel's residents erupted in celebration. Across Pentagram City, demons who had dared to hope felt that hope validated. But Muzan wasn't celebrating. He looked at Metatron with quiet understanding. This changes everything, doesn't it? Not just for me, but for all of hell. Yes, Metatron agreed. Heaven's position has always been that some beings are irredeemable, that certain evils are eternal. You've proven that wrong, which means every demon, every sinner, every damned soul now has legitimate claim to redemption attempts. The system will have to change. And that terrifies them, Muzan said, understanding dawning. Heaven isn't afraid of demons being evil. They're afraid of demons becoming good, because that means their cosmic order is negotiable. Precisely, Metatron replied with a small smile. You've started a revolution, Demon King, whether you intended to or not. Samael, still present but weakened, laughed bitterly. You've doomed yourself, Metatron. Heaven won't accept this. They'll fight the change you've authorized. Let them fight, Metatron said calmly. Change is inevitable. Muzan Kibutsuji has proven that. The only question is whether we embrace it or fight a losing battle against it. He turned to the assembled demons, his voice carrying across Pentagram City and beyond. Let it be known throughout all of hell and heaven, redemption is real, change is possible, and every soul, no matter how damned, deserves the chance to prove they can become something better. With those words, Metatron vanished, returning to heaven to face whatever consequences his judgment would bring. Samael looked at Muzan with something that might have been respect. You've won this round, Demon King, but this war is far from over. Forces older than heaven itself will not accept what you represent. Then let them come, Muzan replied tiredly. I've spent a millennium fighting, I can fight a little. Longer if it means protecting what we've built here. Samael faded into darkness, leaving only Muzan standing in the devastated courtyard. He was exhausted, wounded, pushed beyond any limit he'd experienced even in his 1,000-year history. But he was alive, validated, redeemed. Charlie rushed to him, and this time when she hugged him, Muzan returned the embrace without hesitation. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. We did it, Muzan corrected. I would never have attempted this without you, without your impossible belief that monsters could change. As the hotel's residents gathered around them, as demons across hell began to process what this victory meant, Muzan looked up at hell's eternal red sky. For 1,000 years he had lived without hope, without purpose beyond survival, but now, standing among friends who had witnessed his transformation, having proven that change was possible. Now he had something worth existing for. The battle was over, the war was just beginning, but for the first time in his long, dark existence, Muzan Kibutsuji felt something he never thought he'd experience again. He felt free 6 months after Metatron's judgment. Hell was unrecognizable. The Hazbin Hotel had expanded into a compound spanning several city blocks, housing over 10,000 demons seeking redemption. Other hotels had opened across Pentagram City, inspired by Charlie's success. Even some overlords had begun offering redemption programs, seeing the political and economic value in souls that could earn their way to heaven. Muzan stood on the hotel's highest tower, looking out over the transformed landscape. He was different now, not just in soul, but in purpose. The demon king who had once ruled through fear now taught others how to change, how to overcome their worst natures, how to choose differently. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Charlie joined him, her expression content. "Everything we hoped for actually happening. Demons choosing redemption over damnation, hope instead of despair." "It's chaos," Muzan replied, but there was fondness in his voice. "Your father calls it the redemption revolution. He's not entirely pleased." "Dad never is," Charlie laughed, "but even he can't deny it's working. We've had 3 successful ascensions to heaven this month, 3 souls who earned their redemption and moved on." Muzan nodded, remembering the ceremonies, watching souls transform, shedding their demonic forms, ascending to a realm he might never see. Each one was validation. Each one was proof that what they had started was real. "And what about you?" Charlie asked quietly. "Have you thought about your own ascension? Metatron said you were redeemed. You could probably petition for heaven now." Muzan considered this, the thought of leaving hell, of entering heaven. It should have been his ultimate goal, but something held him back. "Not yet," he said finally. "There's still work to do here, demons who need guidance, systems that need to change," and he looked at Charlie with genuine affection, "friends I'm not ready to leave behind." "You've really changed," Charlie said, her eyes shining with pride. "The demon who arrived here a year ago would never have said that." "The demon who arrived here a year ago was barely alive," Muzan replied. "You gave me something worth living for, worth dying for, worth staying in hell for, apparently." Their moment was interrupted by Vagi's urgent call. "Charlie, Muzan, you need to see this, now." They rushed to the hotel's central hall, where a crowd had gathered around a projection. Vox's news network, which had reluctantly adapted to covering redemption stories, was showing something unprecedented. Heaven's gates were opening, not just cracks for individual souls, but wide, brilliant openings, and descending from them were angels, hundreds of them, led by familiar figures. Seraphina appeared first, her wings blazing, but she wasn't alone. Beside her flew Michael, Gabriel, and other archangels. The entire heavenly host was descending into hell. "This is it," Alastor said, appearing beside them. "Heaven's response. They're either coming to validate Metatron's judgment or overrule it." The angels landed in the hotel's courtyard, their divine presence making many demons flinch. Seraphina stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Muzan Kibutsuji," she declared formally, "the Heavenly Council has deliberated on your redemption and its implications. We have come to deliver their verdict." The hotel fell silent. Everything they had built, every soul they had helped, every demon seeking redemption, all of it hung on what heaven would say next. "The council acknowledges Metatron's judgment," Seraphina continued. "Your redemption is recognized as genuine," but she paused, and Muzan's enhanced senses caught the weight of what was coming. "The question of what your redemption means for hell's entire population has caused significant division in heaven." Michael stepped forward, his warriors bearing somehow less hostile than before. "Some believe that if you can be redeemed, then heaven's gates should open to all who seek redemption. Others fear that would destabilize the cosmic order beyond repair." "And what do you believe?" Muzan asked directly. "I believe," Michael replied slowly, "that I was wrong, that our system has been incomplete, that redemption should be available to all who genuinely seek it, not just those who meet arbitrary standards." He looked around at the demons gathered in the hotel. "Watching you change, watching these souls choose hope over despair. It reminded me what our purpose was supposed to be, not punishment, but the possibility of transformation." Gabriel spoke next, his voice less certain. "But transformation at what cost? If all of hell's demons can seek redemption, what happens to the balance? What happens to the punishment of evil?" "Maybe," Charlie interjected, stepping forward with her characteristic optimism, "punishment isn't the point. Maybe the point is growth, learning, becoming better than we were. Isn't that what divine mercy is supposed to mean? The angels were silent, considering her words. Finally, Seraphina spoke again. The Heavenly Council has reached a compromise. The redemption program will continue and expand. Any demon who genuinely seeks to change will be given the opportunity to prove themselves. But, she looked at Muzan seriously, this revolution you've started requires oversight, guidance from someone who understands both heaven and hell, redemption and damnation. What are you suggesting? Muzan asked warily. We're offering you a position, Michael said, an intermediary between heaven and hell, someone who can judge redemption attempts, guide souls seeking transformation, and maintain balance between the realms. You want me to become what? Muzan asked, incredulous. Some kind of cosmic referee. We want you to become what you already are, Seraphina replied, a bridge, a proof that change is possible, a guide for others seeking the path you've walked. And if I refuse, Muzan asked. Then you're free to ascend to heaven, Michael answered. Your redemption is complete, you've earned your rest, but, he gestured to the demons filling the hotel, these souls still need someone who understands what they're going through, someone who knows what it means to transform from monster to whatever you've become. Muzan looked at Charlie, at the hotel they'd built together, at the impossible dream that had somehow become reality. He thought about ascending to heaven, leaving hell behind, finally escaping the realm of eternal suffering. And he realized with surprising clarity that he didn't want to leave. I accept, he said, on one condition: Charlie remains in charge of the actual redemption program. I'm the bridge between realms, but she's the heart of this movement. That doesn't change. Charlie's face lit up with joy. You're staying, really staying. Someone has to make sure your optimism doesn't get everyone killed, Muzan replied with a small smile. Might as well be me. Seraphina nodded approvingly, then let it be recorded. Muzan Kibutsuji, once the demon king, now redeemed soul and intermediary between heaven and hell. Your transformation is complete, but your work has only begun. She raised her hand and divine light washed over Muzan. When it cleared, he was changed again, not in form, but in essence. He could feel the connection now, threads linking him to both heaven and hell, making him something unprecedented in cosmic history. Neither angel nor demon, neither damned nor blessed, but something new, a being who had walked through darkness and chosen light, who understood both suffering and redemption. What does this mean? Vaggie asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. For hell, for all of us. It means, Alastor said with his characteristic smile, somehow looking pleased, that our dear Muzan has accomplished the truly impossible. He hasn't just redeemed himself, he's redeemed the very concept of redemption, made it real in a way it never was before. As the angels departed, as the hotel's residents celebrated their impossible victory, Muzan found himself alone with his thoughts for a moment. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had killed thousands, that had spread his curse like a plague, that had held dominion over an empire of darkness. They were the same hands, but what they represented had changed, not through divine intervention or cosmic accident, but through choice, through the daily, difficult decision to be better than what he was. Thank you, he said quietly, speaking to no one and everyone, to Charlie who had believed in him, to the demons who had followed his example, to fate which had dropped him into hell and given him a chance he never expected. And perhaps to his former self, the demon king who had been so perfect in his monstrosity that he'd forgot. What it meant to be alive. That version of him was gone now, dead and reborn, transformed into something that could look at the sunrise without fear. A week later, the first official heaven-sanctioned redemption ascension ceremony took place. Muzan stood as witness, as judge, as the bridge between realms. A dozen demons who had proven their transformation stood before him, ready to shed their damned forms and enter heaven. Are you certain? He asked each one. Redemption isn't just about escaping hell, it's about becoming genuinely different, about choosing to be better every day, even when it's difficult. They all confirmed their commitment, and Muzan, using the authority heaven had granted him, opened the path for their ascension. Watching them transform, watching souls rise toward a light he had never expected to see, Muzan felt something profound, not satisfaction that was too simple, not pride that was too ego-driven. It was purpose, pure, absolute, meaningful purpose. Charlie joined him as the ceremony concluded. 12 more souls redeemed, 12 more proofs that this works. 12 more chances given, Muzan corrected. Whether they ultimately succeed or fall back into darkness, that's their choice. All we can do is provide the opportunity. That's all we ever could do, Charlie agreed. She took his hand, a gesture that no longer felt strange to him. I'm glad you stayed, glad you're continuing this work. Where else would I go? Muzan asked with rare humor. Heaven doesn't need a reformed demon king, but hell. He looked out over Pentagram City, at the changes spreading through it like ripples in a pond. Hell needs proof that change is possible, and I suppose I'm that proof now. Years passed, the redemption revolution continued to spread, not just through hell but back to heaven itself. Angels began to question their own assumptions about damnation and punishment. Some even began to wonder if the entire cosmic system needed reformation. Muzan became a legend in his own right, not as the demon king, but as the first redeemed. The proof that no being, no matter how corrupt or evil, was beyond the possibility of change. He trained others in the art of transformation, teaching demons how to overcome their worst impulses. He judged redemption attempts with fairness born from understanding both sides, and slowly, impossibly, he helped reshape hell from a realm of eternal punishment into something more complex, a place of growth, of challenge, of difficult but achievable transformation. The overlords faced with a changing hell either adapted or fell. Valentino, stubborn to the end, refused to accept the new order and was eventually overthrown by his own contracts. Carmilla Carmine, ever pragmatic, became one of redemption's strongest supporters, and the V's, recognizing the shift, transformed their empire to support rather than exploit hell's population. But not everyone was happy with the changes. In heaven's highest councils, in hell's deepest pits, and in the spaces between dimensions, forces plotted and planned. The old order had been challenged, but it wasn't defeated, and something ancient, something that had watched Muzan's transformation with great interest, began to move. On the 10th anniversary of Muzan's arrival in hell, as he stood with Charlie watching another successful redemption ceremony, he felt it, a disturbance in reality itself. Something was coming, something that made even his transformed instincts scream warnings. "Do you feel that?" he asked Charlie. She nodded, her demonic senses picking up the cosmic disruption. Something's wrong, something big. The sky above hell tore open, but it wasn't heaven's golden light or hell's red twilight. It was something else entirely, a void between realities, a space that shouldn't exist. And from it descended a figure Muzan recognized, though he'd never seen them before. A presence he'd felt only once, on the day he fell from his own dimension into hell. Fate itself had arrived, and it had questions. But that, as they say, is another story. For now, in this moment, Muzan Kibutsuji stood in hell surrounded by friends, purpose, and the impossible proof that change was real. He was no longer the demon king who had terrorized his world for a millennium. He was something far more dangerous, a being who had learned that monsters could become heroes, that the damned could find redemption, and that the choice to change mattered more than the nature you were born with. And that legacy, that impossible transformation, would echo through eternity long after his story ended. 100 years after Muzan Kibutsuji's redemption, hell had transformed beyond recognition. The Hazbin Hotel was now a vast academy, training thousands of demons in the art of transformation. Charlie Morningstar had become one of hell's most influential figures, her redemption program the default rather than the exception, and throughout it all, the legend of the Demon K. Ing Who Chose to Change had become hell's most powerful story. Muzan himself had ascended to heaven 20 years after accepting his intermediary role, his work complete. But his influence remained, embedded in hell's new structure, in the souls he'd helped transform, in the proof he'd provided that redemption was real. In the academy's main hall, a statue stood, Muzan in his moment of transformation, dying to become something new. Beneath it, an inscription. Here stood Muzan Kibutsuji, the first redeemed. He proved that no being is beyond salvation, that choice defines us more than nature, and that even the most perfect monster can learn to become human again. His legacy is our hope, his transformation is our proof, his choice is our possibility. And somewhere in a realm beyond heaven and hell, in the space where cosmic forces gathered, Muzan Kibutsuji looked down at the hell he'd helped transform and smiled. He had spent 1,000 years surviving, but these 100 years, learning, growing, changing, helping others do the same, these had been living. And that made all the difference.